Everyone is their own main character. Everyone is their own main character, living inside a story where they are the center and everyone else is a supporting role. And understanding this explains almost every human being you will ever meet. From inside, each person experiences themselves as the protagonist, their thoughts the loudest, their pain the most vivid, their life the true story. Psychologists have a name for the tendency to overestimate how much others notice and think about us, and it flows directly from this, that each of us is trapped at the center of our own perspective. Think of how you replay your own embarrassing moment for days while barely remembering anyone else's, because in your story, it was a major scene, and in theirs, it was nothing. A mind that understands human nature holds this gently, remembering that everyone else is just as absorbed in their own story as you are in yours. You do not have to feel small for being self-centered, because everyone is, by the very design of a single point of view. You only have to remember that the person who slighted you was probably not thinking about you at all, that most people are simply lost in their own narrative, not plotting yours. This one truth dissolves so much hurt, because so much of what feels personal was never personal at all. Only someone else absorbed in being the main character of their own life. To understand that everyone is the center of their own world, as you are of yours, is to feel both more connected and more free, and to take far less of other people's behavior as being about you. People fear embarrassment more than harm. People fear embarrassment more than harm, and this single truth explains a startling amount of human behavior. The dread of looking foolish, of social rejection, of being judged, often outweighs even the fear of real danger, because for most of human history, exclusion from the group meant death. Psychologists find that social pain activates the same brain regions as physical pain, and that the fear of humiliation can override our instinct for self-preservation. Think of how people will risk their safety to avoid looking scared, stay silent in danger rather than make a scene, or avoid a doctor out of embarrassment, choosing possible harm over certain awkwardness. A mind that understands human nature sees this everywhere, in the choices people make to protect their image, even at real cost. You do not have to judge yourself for caring what others think, because that caring is ancient and universal, wired into you by a history where the group was survival. You only have to recognize the fear for what it is, to see that behind much of your own hesitation, and everyone else's, lies not laziness or weakness, but the deep, old terror of social rejection. Understanding this makes people far easier to read, because so much of what they do is quietly organized around avoiding embarrassment. And it softens your view of your own fears, revealing them as something profoundly human rather than a personal flaw. To see how powerfully the fear of looking foolish moves us all is to understand a hidden engine behind countless human choices, including many of your own. Everyone feels like an imposter. Everyone feels like an imposter, at least sometimes, secretly convinced that they are less capable than they appear and that one day they will be found out. This quiet fear is so common that psychologists gave it a name, the imposter phenomenon, and studies suggest that a large majority of people experience it, including the confident, the accomplished, and the ones you would least suspect. Behind the composed surface, most people are improvising, unsure, waiting to be exposed. Think of someone you admire, who seems to have it all together, and consider that they very likely lie awake feeling like a fraud, just as you do, each of you fooled by the other's surface. A mind that understands human nature takes deep comfort in this, in knowing that the self-doubt you feel is not a sign that you are uniquely inadequate, but a sign that you are human. You do not have to wait until you feel fully qualified to act, because almost no one ever does. And the people doing the things you admire are feeling the same doubt and doing them anyway. You only have to recognize that the imposter feeling is nearly universal, that the confident exterior of others hides an interior much like your own. This understanding connects you to everyone, dissolving the loneliness of feeling like the only one pretending. To know that everyone feels like an imposter is to stop measuring your uncertain insides against everyone else's certain outsides, and to move through the world with the quiet knowledge that no one truly has it all figured out. People remember feelings, not facts. People remember feelings, not facts, and this is one of the most useful truths about human nature you can hold. Long after the details of an interaction have faded, the feeling it left behind remains. People forget what you said and did, but they remember, with surprising precision, how you made them feel. Psychologists studying memory find that emotion is the great encoder, that emotionally charged moments are stored deeply while neutral information slips away. Think of a conversation from years ago whose exact words you cannot recall, yet you remember perfectly whether it left you feeling valued or diminished. The feeling outlasted the facts. A mind that understands human nature attends to the emotional trace it leaves, knowing that this, not the content, is what endures in others. You do not have to remember every detail of your interactions or craft perfect words. You only have to recognize that the feeling you create is what people carry away, that your warmth or coldness, your attention or dismissal, is the true message that lasts. This makes you both more understanding and more careful, aware that the emotional residue of a moment is its most lasting effect. It also explains your own memories, why certain people linger warmly and others coldly, long after you have forgotten why. To understand that feelings outlast facts is to see what truly matters in human connection, and to know that the kindness or hurt you leave behind will remain long after every word has been forgotten. Attention is the truest currency. Attention is the truest currency of human connection, more valuable than advice, money, or grand gestures, because to give someone your full attention is to give them the rarest thing in a distracted world. People are starved for it. Beneath most human longing is the simple wish to be truly seen and heard, and genuine attention meets that wish directly. Psychologists find that feeling heard is one of the deepest human needs, and that the quality of our presence with others shapes the strength of every bond. Think of how it feels when someone puts everything down and listens to you completely, without waiting to speak, without glancing away, and how rare and nourishing that presence is. A mind that understands human nature knows that this kind of attention is a gift almost no one gives. You do not have to have the perfect words or the right solution to matter deeply to someone. You only have to offer your genuine presence, your full and undistracted attention, which is worth more than any advice you could give. In a world where everyone is half present, half listening, half elsewhere, the person who truly attends becomes unforgettable. This is why we love those who make us feel fully seen, and why real listening is a kind of love. To understand that attention is the truest currency is to hold the key to human connection, because the deepest way to reach anyone is simply to be wholly present with them, which is a gift you can give freely and which almost no one else will. Everyone is fighting a hidden battle. Everyone is fighting a hidden battle you know nothing about, and holding this truth close will make you kinder and wiser than almost any other insight into human nature. Behind every composed face, every rude stranger, every difficult colleague, there is a private struggle, a grief, a fear, a pain that they carry unseen. What looks like coldness may be exhaustion. What looks like arrogance may be insecurity. What looks like unkindness may be someone barely holding on. Psychologists note how readily we explain others' behavior by their character while ignoring the invisible pressures shaping it. Think of a time you snapped at someone not because of them, but because of a weight you were carrying that they could not see, and how you wished they knew. Everyone around you is carrying such a weight. A mind that understands human nature meets people with this awareness, assuming an unseen struggle behind difficult behavior. You do not have to excuse everything or become a doormat. You only have to remember that the person before you is fighting something you cannot see, that their behavior is shaped by a battle invisible to you. This understanding transforms your irritation into compassion and your judgment into patience. It also softens how you see yourself, reminding you that your own struggles, though hidden, are real and worthy of gentleness. To remember that everyone is fighting a hidden battle is to move through the world with a quiet, universal compassion, seeing past the surface of behavior to the human being struggling beneath it, exactly as you are struggling beneath yours. People copy who they are near. People copy who they are near, absorbing the moods, habits, and even the beliefs of those around them, usually without any awareness that it is happening. We are far more porous than we like to think. Psychologists have documented emotional contagion, the way feelings spread from person to person, and the way we unconsciously mimic the posture, speech, and energy of those we spend time with. Think of how a calm person can settle a whole room, or how one anxious person can put everyone on edge, or how you slowly began to sound like a close friend. The influence flows constantly, beneath notice. A mind that understands human nature takes this seriously, recognizing that the people you surround yourself with are quietly shaping who you become. You do not have to cut everyone difficult out of your life or fear all influence. You only have to recognize the power of proximity, that you absorb the emotional and behavioral climate of those around you, and to choose your closest company with some care. The people you spend the most time with are, in a real sense, becoming part of you, their habits and moods seeping in. This is why calm company steadies you and chaotic company unsettles you, why some relationships lift you and others slowly drain you. To understand that people copy who they are near is to take responsibility for the climate you live in, and to surround yourself, when you can, with those whose presence draws out the person you most want to be. We judge ourselves by intentions. We judge ourselves by our intentions, but others by their actions. And this single asymmetry explains a great deal of conflict and misunderstanding between people. When you do something that hurts someone, you know you did not mean to, so you feel unfairly blamed. When someone hurts you, you see only what they did, not the intention behind it, so you judge them harshly. Everyone is running this double standard at once, generous with themselves and strict with others. Psychologists connect this to the way we have full access to our own inner world, but only the outer behavior of everyone else. Think of a time you were judged for an action that did not reflect your heart, and how deeply unfair it felt, and then consider how often you judge others exactly that way. A mind that understands human nature holds this asymmetry in view, extending to others some of the benefit of the doubt it naturally gives itself. You do not have to excuse every harmful action or ignore real patterns. You only have to remember that behind other people's actions are intentions you cannot see, just as behind yours are intentions others cannot see. This understanding softens your judgments and cools countless conflicts, because so much friction comes from mistaking someone's impact for their intent. It also helps you communicate your own intentions more clearly, knowing others cannot read them. To understand that we judge ourselves by intentions and others by actions is to close a gap that quietly divides people, and to meet others with the same generosity you instinctively grant yourself. Kindness returns to the kind. Kindness returns to the kind, not always from the same person, and not always at once, but as a general current that shapes a life. Because the way you treat people quietly determines the world that forms around you. Human beings are wired for reciprocity, and warmth tends to call forth warmth, cooperation to invite cooperation, over time and across many interactions. Psychologists studying social bonds find that generosity and kindness build the trust and goodwill that make life richer and safer. Think of how a genuinely kind person seems surrounded by allies and affection, while a cold or cruel one, over the years, finds themselves increasingly alone. The pattern is not magic. It is the slow accumulation of how you have made others feel. A mind that understands human nature grasps that kindness is not naive, but wise, a long investment in the quality of your own life. You do not have to be a pushover or kind only for reward, which corrupts the kindness. You only have to recognize that warmth, offered genuinely and consistently, tends to return, that the goodwill you create becomes the atmosphere you live in. This is not about transactions, but about the general shape of a life, the way kindness builds a world that holds you, and cruelty builds one that isolates you. To understand that kindness returns to the kind is to see that being good to others is also, in the deepest sense, being good to yourself, and that the warmth you give quietly becomes the world you come to live in. People believe what they repeat. People believe what they repeat and what they hear repeated, because the human mind mistakes familiarity for truth. A statement encountered many times begins to feel true, regardless of its accuracy, simply because the mind finds it easy to process. Psychologists call this the illusory truth effect, and it shapes belief far more than we like to admit. Think of how an idea you heard again and again slowly came to feel obviously true, or how repeating a story about yourself, told enough times, hardened into a fact you no longer questioned. Repetition is quietly one of the most powerful forces on human belief. A mind that understands human nature stays aware of this, noticing that the things it hears constantly and the things it tells itself constantly are shaping what it believes. You do not have to distrust everything familiar or question every settled idea. You only have to recognize the power of repetition, both in the world around you and in your own inner voice. Because the stories you repeat about yourself become the beliefs you live by. This is why negative self-talk is so dangerous, and why the messages you are exposed to again and again quietly become your sense of reality. It also gives you a gentle power, since you can choose which truths to repeat until they take root. To understand that people believe what they repeat is to guard what you let echo through your mind, and to notice how much of what feels true is simply what you have heard and told yourself most often. Names are the sweetest sound. Names are the sweetest sound to the person who owns them, and this small truth opens a surprising amount of human warmth. A person's name is deeply tied to their sense of self, and hearing it, remembered and spoken with care, produces a small, genuine pleasure and a feeling of being recognized. Psychologists find that people respond warmly to their own names, and that remembering someone's name signals that they mattered enough to be held in mind. Think of the small lift you feel when someone you did not expect to remember you uses your name, and the quiet sting when someone forgets it, as though you had not registered at all. A mind that understands human nature knows that to remember and use a person's name is a simple, powerful way to make them feel seen. You do not have to turn this into a technique or use it to manipulate, which people can sense and which corrupts it. You only have to recognize that a name carries a person's identity, and that speaking it with genuine warmth is a small act of recognition that means more than it seems. In a world where people so often feel like a face in a crowd, being known by name is a quiet gift. It says, "You are not anonymous to me. You registered. You matter." To understand the sweetness of a person's own name is to hold a small key to human warmth, and to know that one of the simplest ways to honor someone is to remember and gently use who they are. Everyone wants to be seen. Everyone wants to be seen, truly seen, beneath the surface they present. And this longing may be the deepest thread running through all of human nature. Under the roles we play and the images we manage lies a quiet ache to be known and accepted as we really are, not for our performance, but for our actual selves. Psychologists describe this need for authentic recognition as fundamental, noting that being truly known by even one person is among the most healing human experiences. Think of the profound relief of being with someone you can fully be yourself around. No mask, no performance, and how rare and precious that feeling is. Beneath all the striving and posturing, this is what most people are reaching for. A mind that understands human nature sees this longing everywhere. Behind the bravado, the achievements, the carefully managed images, a person hoping to be seen and loved as they are. You do not have to see through everyone or become everyone's confidant. You only have to remember that beneath the surface of each person is someone longing to be genuinely known, and that offering real recognition is one of the greatest gifts you can give. It is also what you long for yourself, the reason certain relationships feel like coming home. To understand that everyone wants to be seen is to hold the master key to human nature, because behind every behavior, every mask, every defense, is a person quietly hoping that someone will look past all of it and truly see them, exactly as they are. The mind decides before you know. The mind decides before you know it has, and this is one of the most humbling truths about human nature. We imagine ourselves as rational beings who weigh the evidence and then choose. But research suggests the reverse is often true, that the decision arrives first, made by faster, deeper processes, and the reasoning follows to justify it. Neuroscientists have even detected the brain preparing a choice before the person becomes consciously aware of deciding. Think of a time you were sure you had reasoned your way to a conclusion, only to realize your mind had already made up its mind and your arguments were built afterward to defend it. The feeling of deciding came after the deciding. A mind that understands human nature holds its own certainty a little more humbly, aware that much of its reasoning is justification for choices made below awareness. You do not have to distrust every thought or fall into paralysis. You only have to recognize that you are not as purely rational as you feel, that your gut, your mood, and your unconscious often decide before your reasons arrive. This understanding makes you gentler with yourself and others, seeing that people rarely change their minds through argument alone, because the argument was never what decided them. It also invites a useful humility, a willingness to notice when your reasons are really rationalizations. To understand that the mind decides before you know is to see the hidden machinery beneath your own choices, and to hold your certainties with the lightness of someone who knows how much happens in the dark, below the reach of conscious thought. We see what we expect to see. We see what we expect to see. because the mind does not passively record reality, but actively predicts it and then perceives what it predicted. Your expectations shape your perception so powerfully that you can look directly at something and fail to see it, or see something that is not there, simply because your mind was primed for a different reality. Psychologists have shown this again and again, that attention and expectation determine what reaches awareness, and that we are astonishingly blind to what we do not expect. Think of how you can read a page and miss an obvious error, or how two people can witness the same event and honestly remember it differently, each seeing through the lens of their expectations. A mind that understands human nature knows that perception is not a window, but an interpretation. You do not have to distrust your senses entirely or doubt everything you see. You only have to recognize that your expectations are quietly shaping your reality, that you tend to find what you are looking for and miss what you are not. This explains so much about why people who expect hostility find it everywhere, why those who expect kindness seem to meet more of it, why we so often see the version of others we already believed in. It also offers a gentle power, since shifting your expectations can shift what you perceive. To understand that we see what we expect to see is to hold your own perceptions more humbly, and to realize that changing what you look for can quietly change the world you find. The first thing colors the rest. The first thing colors everything that follows, because the mind uses its earliest impression as a frame through which it interprets all that comes after. The first trait you notice in a person, the first number you hear, the first mood of an encounter, sets a tone that quietly shapes your reading of everything else. Psychologists call one version of this the primacy effect, and another the halo effect, the way a single early impression spreads to color unrelated judgments. Think of how meeting someone who seemed warm at first made you interpret their later actions generously, while a cold first impression made you read the same behavior with suspicion. The first thing set the lens. A mind that understands human nature stays aware of this, knowing that first impressions are powerful and not always fair, both when it forms them and when it makes them. You do not have to distrust every first impression or ignore your instincts. You only have to recognize how much weight the first thing carries, how a single early impression can color an entire relationship, and to leave room to revise it. This explains why first meetings matter so much, why a strong start can carry a relationship and a bad one can doom it before it begins. It also invites fairness, a willingness to look past the frame the first impression created. To understand that the first thing colors the rest is to hold your early judgments loosely, and to give both others and yourself the chance to be seen beyond the lens of a single first moment. We crave what is scarce. We crave what is scarce, valuing things more simply because they are rare, hard to get, or slipping away. And this ancient wiring shapes desire far more than we realize. The mind treats scarcity as a signal of worth, so the same thing becomes more desirable the moment it seems limited. Psychologists call this the scarcity principle, and it operates beneath conscious choice, in our wanting of people, opportunities, and objects alike. Think of how an option you were lukewarm about suddenly became precious the instant you might lose it, or how a person's pulling away can inflame desire that their closeness had cooled. The scarcity, not the thing itself, drove the wanting. A mind that understands human nature notices this machinery at work, in itself and in others. You do not have to distrust all desire or assume everything you want is an illusion. You only have to recognize when scarcity, rather than genuine value, is driving your craving. When you want something mainly because it is hard to have or about to vanish. This explains so much about human longing, why we chase the unavailable, why we value what resists us, why abundance can dull desire and scarcity can inflame it. It also protects you, because seeing the scarcity effect lets you ask whether you truly want a thing or only want it because it is slipping away. To understand that we crave what is scarce is to see a hidden engine of your own desires and to choose more freely what you actually value, apart from the mere fact of its rarity. Losing hurts more than winning helps. Losing hurts more than winning helps, and this imbalance quietly governs an enormous amount of human behavior. The pain of losing something is psychologically far stronger than the pleasure of gaining something of equal value, so we work harder to avoid loss than to achieve gain. Psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky named this loss aversion, and found the pain of a loss to be roughly twice as powerful as the joy of an equivalent win. Think of how much worse it feels to lose money you had than to miss out on the same amount you never held, or how the fear of losing a relationship can keep you in it long past its worth. The dread of loss outweighs the hope of gain. A mind that understands human nature sees this everywhere, in why people cling to what they have, resist change, and fear loss more than they pursue reward. You do not have to override this instinct entirely or ignore real risks. You only have to recognize when loss aversion is distorting your choices, keeping you in something merely because leaving feels like losing, when starting fresh might serve you far better. This explains why change is so hard, why people stay in bad situations, why the fear of losing what we have can trap us. It also frees you, because seeing the imbalance lets you weigh gains and losses more fairly. To understand that losing hurts more than winning helps is to recognize a powerful bias in your own decisions and to choose more clearly, less ruled by the outsized fear of loss. The unfinished thing haunts us. The unfinished thing haunts us, occupying the mind far more than anything we have completed, because the brain holds open loops until they are closed. A task left undone, a conversation left unresolved, a question left unanswered, keeps returning to awareness, tugging at attention, refusing to be forgotten. Psychologist Bluma Zygarnik discovered this effect, that we remember interrupted and incomplete tasks far better than finished ones, as though the mind cannot rest until the loop is closed. Think of how a completed task vanishes from your thoughts while an unfinished one nags at you all day, or how an unresolved argument replays endlessly while a resolved one fades. The incompleteness itself is what haunts. A mind that understands human nature knows this, both to make peace with it and to use it kindly. You do not have to finish everything at once or torment yourself over every open loop. You only have to recognize why the unfinished things pull at you, why unresolved matters occupy your mind out of proportion to their importance, and to understand that closing a loop, even partially, brings relief. This explains why unfinished business weighs on us, why we crave closure, why an unresolved ending can haunt for years. It also offers gentle guidance, since even a small step toward completion or a conscious decision to let something go can quiet the nagging. To understand that the unfinished thing haunts us is to see why your mind will not rest around open loops, and to find peace either by closing them or by choosing, deliberately, to release them. We value what costs us effort. We value what costs us effort, prizing the things we have worked for far more than the things that came easily, sometimes beyond all reason. The labor we invest in something becomes woven into how much we cherish it, so that effort itself creates attachment. Psychologists call one version of this the IKEA effect. The way people value things they built themselves more highly than identical things they did not. Think of how much more you treasure something you struggled to create, earn, or achieve than something handed to you freely, and how the difficulty itself deepened the meaning. The effort became part of the value. A mind that understands human nature sees this in itself and others, in why hard-won things feel precious and easy things feel cheap. You do not have to distrust this or assume all your attachments are irrational. You only have to recognize how effort shapes value, both the good, in how struggle can deepen meaning, and the trap, in how sunk effort can make us overvalue things that no longer serve us. This explains why we cling to what we have worked hard for, why the difficult relationship or the long project can be so hard to abandon, why we defend our own creations so fiercely. It also illuminates a path to meaning, since investing genuine effort in what matters deepens our bond with it. To understand that we value what costs us effort is to see why struggle and worth are so entangled in us, and to choose, wisely, where to spend the effort that will shape what you come to cherish. The mind prefers an easy answer. The mind prefers an easy answer, reaching for the simplest available explanation and resisting the harder work of genuine thought, because thinking deeply is metabolically expensive and the brain conserves energy. When faced with a difficult question, the mind often quietly swaps it for an easier one and answers that instead, without noticing the substitution. Psychologists describe two modes of thought: one, fast and effortless; one, slow and demanding, and find that we default to the fast one whenever we can. Think of how readily you accept a simple story that explains a complex situation, or how a confident, easy answer feels more satisfying than a nuanced, uncertain one, even when the nuanced one is truer. The mind chose ease over accuracy. A mind that understands human nature stays aware of this pull toward the effortless answer. You do not have to overthink everything or distrust all your quick judgments, many of which serve you well. You only have to recognize when you are reaching for an easy answer to avoid a hard truth. When a simple story is comforting precisely because it spares you from thinking further. This explains so much why simple explanations spread faster than complex ones, why people prefer confident certainty to honest doubt, why the truth often loses to the tidy story. It also invites a useful discipline, a willingness to sit with complexity rather than grabbing the first easy answer. To understand that the mind prefers an easy answer is to catch yourself in the act of choosing comfort over truth, and to think, when it matters, a little more slowly and honestly than your energy-saving mind would prefer. We rewrite the past to fit now. We rewrite the past to fit the present, unconsciously editing our own history so that it agrees with who we are and what we believe now. Memory is not a recording, but a reconstruction. And each time we revisit the past, we quietly revise it to match our current feelings, beliefs, and self-image. Psychologists find that we routinely misremember our past attitudes, adjusting them to fit our present ones, all without any awareness of the editing. Think of how you may recall always having felt a certain way about someone, when in truth your feelings changed, or how a memory shifted to make your past self more consistent with who you are today. The past bent to fit the present. A mind that understands human nature holds its own memories a little more humbly. You do not have to distrust everything you remember or lose faith in your own history. You only have to recognize that memory serves the present, that you may be revising your past to fit your current story without knowing it. This explains why people remember their histories so differently, why we can be so certain of memories that are partly invented, why the past seems to confirm whatever we believe now. It also offers compassion, since others are doing the same, honestly remembering a past that has been quietly edited. To understand that we rewrite the past to fit now is to hold your own memories with gentle skepticism, and to grant that the story you tell about your life is shaped as much by who you are today as by what actually happened. The body shapes the feeling. The body shapes the feeling as much as the feeling shapes the body, because emotion is not only in the mind, but in the flesh, and the state of your body quietly steers your emotional life. How you hold yourself, whether you are rested or exhausted, hungry or fed, tense or relaxed, all shape the feelings that seem to arise from nowhere. Psychologists find that bodily states powerfully influence mood and judgment, that we often feel our way into thoughts rather than the other way around. Think of how the same problem feels unbearable when you are tired and manageable when you are rested, or how a knot of dread in your stomach shaped your whole reading of a situation. The body was speaking, and the mind obeyed. A mind that understands human nature attends to the body as a source of feeling, not just a container for it. You do not have to reduce all emotion to biology or ignore the real content of your feelings. You only have to recognize how much your physical state colors your emotional one. That fatigue, hunger, and tension can generate feelings that seem to be about your life, but are really about your body. This explains so much. Why despair often lifts after sleep. Why hard conversations go worse when we are depleted. Why tending the body steadies the mind. It also offers a gentle remedy, since caring for your physical state is one of the surest ways to shift your emotional one. To understand that the body shapes the feeling is to remember that sometimes the wisest response to a dark mood is not to analyze it, but to rest, eat, breathe, and let the body lead you home. We trust the familiar over the true. We trust the familiar over the true, feeling safer with what we know than with what is actually right. Because familiarity itself creates a sense of comfort and trust that has nothing to do with accuracy. The mind mistakes the ease of the familiar for safety, preferring known people, ideas, and patterns, even when unfamiliar ones would serve us better. Psychologists call this the mere exposure effect, the way repeated contact breeds liking and trust, regardless of merit. Think of how you can prefer a familiar discomfort to an unknown improvement. Stay with what you know rather than risk what might be better. Or trust a familiar voice over a wiser, unfamiliar one. Familiarity felt like truth. A mind that understands human nature notices this pull, in itself, and in how people cling to the known. You do not have to abandon everything familiar or distrust all comfort. You only have to recognize when familiarity, rather than genuine value, is driving your trust. When you are choosing the known simply because it is known. This explains why people stay in familiar unhappiness, why we are drawn to what resembles our past, why the comfortable and the good can be so easily confused. It also frees you, since seeing the effect lets you consider whether the unfamiliar option might actually be better. To understand that we trust the familiar over the true is to notice when comfort is masquerading as wisdom, and to give the unfamiliar, when it matters, a fair hearing against the merely known. The group in us overrides the self. The group in us overrides the self, so that the desire to belong can override our own judgment, values, and even our perception, because for most of human history, exclusion from the group meant death. We are built to fit in, and this ancient wiring can quietly overpower our individual sense of what is right or true. Psychologists have shown how readily people conform to a group, doubting their own clear perception, adopting the group's beliefs, and going along with things they would never choose alone. Think of a time you stayed silent, laughed along, or agreed with something against your own judgment, simply to remain part of the group, and how strong that pull was. The need to belong overrode the self. A mind that understands human nature respects this force without being ruled by it. You do not have to reject all belonging or pride yourself on always standing apart, since connection is a genuine human need. You only have to recognize how powerfully the group can override your individual judgment, how the fear of exclusion can quietly bend your values and even your perception. This explains so much: why crowds do what individuals would not, why people follow groups into error, why the pressure to belong can silence conscience. It also protects you, since seeing the pull lets you check your own judgment separately from the group's. To understand that the group in us overrides the self is to hold your belonging and your integrity in balance, and to remember that you can be part of a group without letting it think for you. The machinery you can now see. The machinery you can now see loses some of its grip the moment you understand it, and that is what this tier has quietly given you. Every truth here has revealed a hidden mechanism, the decision made before you know, the perception shaped by expectation, the pull of scarcity, of loss, of the familiar. And each one, once seen, can no longer move you entirely in the dark. This is the great value of understanding the mind's machinery, that awareness itself creates a small freedom from it. Researchers find that simply knowing about a bias reduces its power because you can catch it in the act. Think of how differently you will notice your own mind now, when it reaches for an easy answer, when it craves what is scarce, when it fears a loss out of proportion, seeing the gears turn. A mind that understands human nature does not become cold or mechanical, reducing itself to a machine. It becomes wiser and freer, able to feel and choose while quietly recognizing the hidden forces at work. You do not have to master every mechanism or achieve perfect rationality, which no human can. You only have to carry this awareness so that when the machinery moves, you can see it moving and choose whether to follow. Rest tonight in knowing that the hidden forces which quietly move so many people now move a little less invisibly in you, and that a mind which can see its own machinery has taken a real step toward genuine freedom, understanding itself not to escape being human, but to be human with open eyes. We become who we are treated as. We become who we are treated as, slowly shaped by the expectations others hold of us until we grow to match them. The way people see us and behave toward us quietly molds who we become because we tend to live into the roles we are handed. Psychologists have shown this powerfully, that when others expect more of a person, that person often rises to meet it, and when others expect little, the person often shrinks to fit. Think of how a teacher who believed in you drew out abilities you did not know you had, or how being treated as difficult can slowly make a person difficult. The treatment shaped the person. A mind that understands human nature holds this with care, aware of how much we shape one another simply through how we see each other. You do not have to take responsibility for everyone or blame all your traits on others. You only have to recognize this quiet force, both the way others' expectations have shaped you and the way your expectations shape those around you. This explains so much: why belief in a person can transform them, why low expectations can become self-fulfilling, why we so often become the reflection others hold up to us. It also offers a gentle power, since seeing the best in someone can help call it forth. To understand that we become who we are treated as is to recognize the profound influence we have on one another and to treat the people around you and yourself as the person you most hope they can become. People live up or down to belief. People live up or down to what is believed of them, rising toward faith and sinking toward doubt, because expectation has a way of shaping reality. This is closely tied to how we become who we are treated as, but it runs deeper into the quiet power of belief itself. When someone genuinely believes in a person, that belief becomes a kind of scaffolding they can climb. And when someone expects failure, that expectation can become a weight that pulls a person down. Psychologists have documented how expectations, even unspoken ones, subtly alter behavior on both sides until they come true. Think of how you performed for someone who believed in you versus someone who clearly did not, and how differently you showed up in each case. Belief lifted you, doubt diminished you. A mind that understands human nature knows the power it holds in what it believes about others. You do not have to pretend everyone is capable of everything or ignore reality. You only have to recognize that your belief in a person is not neutral, that it can genuinely help lift them or quietly hold them down. This explains why encouragement can transform someone, why a mentor's faith can change a life, why constant doubt can slowly break a person's confidence. It also invites responsibility, since the beliefs you hold about others shape what they become. To understand that people live up or down to belief is to hold your expectations of others as a kind of gift or burden you place upon them, and to offer, when you can, the faith that helps them rise. We follow the crowd without knowing. We follow the crowd without knowing we are doing it, taking our cues from those around us so automatically that we mistake the group's behavior for our own choice. When we are unsure how to act, we look to others and we copy them, usually below awareness. Psychologists call this social proof and find that we rely on it, especially when we are uncertain, assuming that if everyone is doing something, it must be correct. Think of how you have judged a restaurant by its crowd, hesitated to be the first to react, or adopted an opinion mainly because those around you held it, without realizing you were following. The crowd decided, and you called it your own view. A mind that understands human nature notices this pull, in itself and in how easily people move together. You do not have to reject all social cues, which often guide us well, or pride yourself on never following. You only have to recognize when you are taking your behavior from the crowd rather than from your own judgment, especially in moments of uncertainty. This explains so much: why trends spread, why crowds gather more crowds, why we look to others to know how to feel and act. It also protects you, since seeing the mechanism lets you pause and consult your own sense of things. To understand that we follow the crowd without knowing is to catch yourself borrowing your behavior from those around you, and to choose, at least sometimes, from your own judgment, rather than the quiet momentum of the group. Status quietly runs every room. Status quietly runs every room, shaping how people speak, defer, compete, and position themselves, usually without anyone naming what is happening. Beneath the surface of ordinary interaction runs a constant, subtle negotiation of rank: who defers to whom, who is listened to, who takes up space. Those who study social behavior find that status dynamics operate in nearly every group, ancient and automatic, driving much of what people do. Think of how a room shifts when a high-status person enters, how people angle for position in a conversation, How much of what is said is really about establishing or protecting standing? The status game was running the whole time. A mind that understands human nature sees this hidden layer, not to compete more ruthlessly, but to understand what is actually happening. You do not have to play every status game or become obsessed with rank, which is its own trap. You only have to recognize that much of human behavior is quietly organized around status, that people's need to feel respected and to avoid humiliation drives more than they admit. This explains so much: why people boast, why they fear looking foolish, why slights wound so deeply, why so many conflicts are really about respect. It also offers compassion, since seeing the status anxiety beneath someone's behavior reveals the insecure human underneath. To understand that status quietly runs every room is to read the hidden currents of social life and to move through them with more insight and less reactivity, seeing the ancient game for what it is. We like those who are like us. We like those who are like us, drawn to people who share our traits, tastes, backgrounds, and beliefs because similarity feels safe and familiar to a social animal. The more someone resembles us, the more we tend to trust and like them, often without any awareness of why. Psychologists call this the similarity attraction effect and find it to be one of the strongest predictors of who we befriend, trust, and love. Think of how quickly you warmed to someone who shared your background, your humor, your way of seeing the world, and how that resemblance created an easy, immediate closeness. The similarity did the work. A mind that understands human nature notices this pull, both to use it kindly and to guard against its narrowness. You do not have to distrust all connection based on similarity, which forms many genuine bonds. You only have to recognize that this preference, while natural, can also make you insular, drawn only to your own reflection and wary of difference. This explains so much: why people cluster with those like them, why difference can breed distrust, why we find instant comfort in shared ground. It also invites growth, since some of the most enriching relationships cross lines of difference, offering what sameness never could. To understand that we like those who are like us is to recognize both the warmth and the limitation of this instinct, and to remain open to the people whose differences might teach you what your own reflection never could. Shared struggle bonds. People fast. Shared struggle bonds. People faster and deeper than shared pleasure, forging closeness in hardship that easy times rarely match. When people go through something difficult together, they form a bond of unusual strength because struggle strips away pretense and reveals who we really are. Psychologists find that shared adversity builds powerful connection, that surviving something hard together creates a closeness that comfort alone cannot. Think of the deep bonds formed among those who endured something difficult together: a crisis, a challenge, a hard season, and how that shared struggle tied them in a way ordinary friendship rarely does. The hardship became the bond. A mind that understands human nature knows this, both to make sense of its own deepest connections and to face difficulty with less despair. You do not have to seek out suffering to bond with others or romanticize hardship. You only have to recognize that struggle shared can deepen connection, that some of the strongest bonds are forged in difficulty rather than ease. This explains so much: why crises bring people together, why those who have suffered alongside us feel like family, why easy relationships can feel shallow next to hard-won ones. It also offers comfort in hard times, since the struggle you share with others can become the very thing that binds you to them. To understand that shared struggle bonds people fast is to see the hidden gift inside difficulty and to recognize that the people who stood beside you in your hardest moments are woven into you in a way that no easy time could ever match. We defend our group before truth. We defend our group before the truth, protecting the beliefs and honor of the tribe we belong to, even against clear evidence, because belonging often matters to us more than being right. Once we identify with a group, its beliefs become part of our identity, and challenging them feels like a personal attack, so we defend them fiercely, sometimes past all reason. Psychologists studying group identity find that people will distort facts, reject evidence, and rationalize endlessly to protect the beliefs of their group. Think of how hard it is to change someone's mind on a belief tied to their identity, or how you yourself may have defended a group's position more out of loyalty than genuine conviction. The tribe came before the truth. A mind that understands human nature sees this clearly in others and, harder still, in itself. You do not have to abandon all group loyalty or treat belonging as worthless, since it is a deep human need. You only have to recognize how powerfully group identity can override honest thinking, how the need to belong can bend even your perception of truth. This explains so much: why people cling to group beliefs against evidence, why tribalism runs so deep, why facts so rarely change committed minds. It also invites humility, a willingness to notice when you are defending your group rather than the truth. To understand that we defend our group before truth is to hold your own group loyalties with open eyes, and to remember that belonging, however precious, should not be allowed to think for you. People give back what they get. People give back what they get, returning kindness for kindness and hostility for hostility, because reciprocity is one of the deepest rules woven into human nature. We feel a strong, almost automatic pull to repay what others do to us, in both directions, so the way you treat people tends to shape the way they treat you back. Psychologists call this the norm of reciprocity and find it to be one of the most universal principles of social life. Think of how a genuine act of warmth softened someone toward you, or how meeting hostility with hostility escalated a conflict, each side returning what it received. The exchange fed itself. A mind that understands human nature uses this wisely, knowing that it often sets the tone others will mirror back. You do not have to be endlessly giving or naive about those who exploit reciprocity, which some do. You only have to recognize that people tend to return what they are given, that the warmth or coldness you bring into an interaction is often what comes back to you. This explains so much: why kindness tends to spread, why conflict tends to escalate, why the energy you offer shapes the response you receive. It also offers a quiet power, since you can often change the tone of an interaction by changing what you bring to it first. To understand that people give back what they get is to recognize your own influence on how others treat you, and to lead, when you can, with the warmth you hope to receive in return. We obey a voice of authority. We obey a voice of authority far more readily than we like to believe, deferring to those who seem to be in charge, even against our own judgment and values. The instinct to follow authority runs deep, trained into us from childhood and reinforced throughout life, and it can override our own conscience with startling ease. Psychologist Stanley Milgram famously demonstrated how ordinary people would follow authoritative instructions to a shocking degree, simply because someone in charge told them to. Think of a time you went along with a confident, authoritative figure against your own better sense, deferring to their position rather than trusting your own judgment. The authority overrode you. A mind that understands human nature respects this instinct while refusing to be ruled by it. You do not have to reject all authority, which would be foolish, or distrust every expert. You only have to recognize how powerfully the appearance of authority can move you, how readily you may defer even when your own judgment objects. This explains so much: why people follow leaders into error, why titles and confidence command obedience, why the voice of authority can quiet the voice of conscience. It also protects you, since seeing the instinct lets you keep a small space for your own judgment, even before the powerful. To understand that we obey a voice of authority is to hold your deference consciously rather than automatically, and to remember that respecting genuine expertise does not require surrendering your own conscience to anyone who merely sounds in charge. Belonging feels like survival. Belonging feels like survival because, for most of human history, it was. And this ancient truth explains the enormous power that acceptance and rejection hold over us. To our deepest wiring, being cast out of the group meant death. So the need to belong is not a mere preference, but a survival instinct. And the fear of exclusion can feel like a threat to life itself. Psychologists find that social rejection activates the same neural pathways as physical pain, and that the need to belong is among the most fundamental human motivations. Think of how devastating exclusion feels, how a fear of rejection can shape your choices, how much you may do simply to remain part of a group. The pull is not weakness, it is ancient survival. A mind that understands human nature treats this need with respect rather than shame. You do not have to conquer your need to belong or pretend rejection does not hurt. You only have to recognize its power, to understand that the intensity of your longing to belong and your fear of exclusion are written into you by a long history where the group meant life. This explains so much: why rejection wounds so deeply, why we fear standing out, why belonging can feel like a matter of life and death. It also offers self-compassion, since your social fears are not flaws, but ancient instincts. To understand that belonging feels like survival is to hold your own need for connection with gentleness, and to recognize that the ache to be accepted is not weakness, but one of the oldest and most human parts of you. We perform different selves for each. We perform different selves for different people, showing one version to our family, another to our colleagues, another to our friends, not out of dishonesty, but because we are social creatures who adapt to each relationship. There is no single fixed self that we present identically to everyone. Instead, we bring out different facets of ourselves depending on who we are with. Sociologists describe this as the way we manage the impressions we give, presenting the version of ourselves that fits each situation. Think of how differently you speak, joke, and carry yourself with your oldest friend versus your boss versus a stranger, and how each version is genuinely you, yet shaped by the relationship. You were performing, and it was still honest. A mind that understands human nature accepts this fluidity without judging it as fake. You do not have to have one rigid self or feel like a fraud for adapting, which is natural and human. You only have to recognize that you and everyone present different selves in different contexts, and that this is not deception, but the normal flexibility of a social creature. This explains so much: why people seem different in different settings, why you may barely recognize a friend among their family, why we all contain multitudes. It also offers freedom, since you need not force yourself into a single fixed identity. To understand that we perform different selves for each is to release the pressure of being one unchanging person, and to accept the natural, honest way we each bring out different parts of ourselves depending on who is there to meet them. Loneliness hurts like a wound. Loneliness hurts like a physical wound because, to a social animal, isolation is a genuine danger, and the pain of it is the body's ancient alarm calling us back to connection. Loneliness is not a character flaw or a sign of weakness. It is a signal, as real and as important as hunger or thirst, telling us that a fundamental need is going unmet. Researchers find that chronic loneliness harms the body as seriously as many physical conditions, and that the pain of it evolved precisely to drive us back toward others. Think of how the ache of loneliness can feel physical, a heaviness, an emptiness, and how it pulls at you the way hunger does, insisting that something essential is missing. That pain is a message, not a defect. A mind that understands human nature treats loneliness with compassion rather than shame. You do not have to be embarrassed by loneliness or see it as a personal failing. You only have to recognize it as a signal, a healthy alarm telling you that your deep need for connection is not being met and deserves to be answered. This explains so much: why isolation is so painful, why we need others so profoundly, why connection heals in ways little else can. It also offers direction, since loneliness, heard rightly, points you toward the connection you need. To understand that loneliness hurts like a wound is to stop blaming yourself for feeling it, and to recognize the ache as your own nature calling you, wisely and insistently, back toward the belonging that every human being requires. The social world you now see. The social world you now see is one you can move through with far more understanding, because this tier has revealed the hidden forces that shape us through one another. Every truth here has shown a way we are formed by others. The expectations that mold us, the crowd we follow, the status we chase, the belonging we crave. And seeing these forces clearly makes the whole social world more legible and less bewildering. This is the great value of understanding our social nature, that so much confusing human behavior becomes comprehensible once you see the ancient instincts beneath it. Researchers of social behavior often note that recognizing these dynamics brings both insight and peace, because you stop taking so much personally. Think of how differently you will read a room now, seeing the status games, the crowd following, the need to belong, understanding the currents beneath the surface. A mind that understands human nature does not become cynical or manipulative, using this knowledge against others. It becomes wiser and more compassionate, seeing the deeply human needs driving behavior that once seemed baffling or hurtful. You do not have to analyze every interaction or treat people as puzzles to solve. You only have to carry this understanding so that the social world becomes less confusing and less wounding, its hidden logic revealed. Rest tonight in knowing that the forces which quietly shape all of us through one another are now visible to you, and that a mind which understands our social nature moves through the human world with more insight, more compassion, and far less of the hurt that comes from mistaking ancient instincts for personal attacks. The confident ones often feel small. The confident ones often feel small inside, and understanding this dissolves the intimidation we feel toward those who seem so sure of themselves. The people who project the most confidence are frequently the ones working hardest to hide their doubt, because a bold exterior is often built precisely over an insecure interior. Psychologists find that outward confidence and inner security do not always match, that some of the most self-assured surfaces conceal the deepest uncertainty. Think of someone who seemed utterly self-possessed, whom you later discovered to be riddled with the same fears as everyone else. Their confidence a carefully maintained performance. The surface and the interior did not match. A mind that understands human nature is less intimidated by displays of confidence, seeing them as possible signs of hidden insecurity rather than proof of inner strength. You do not have to assume everyone confident is secretly fragile, since some are genuinely secure. You only have to recognize that outward confidence is not reliable evidence of inner peace, that the boldest surface may hide the most anxious depths. This explains so much why the show-offs and the swaggering can be so brittle when challenged, why those who most need to appear strong are often the least sure inside. It also frees you from feeling small before others' confidence, since you no longer take the performance as the truth. To understand that the confident ones often feel small is to stop being intimidated by surfaces and to meet even the most self-assured people as fellow humans, likely carrying the same doubts you carry beneath a bolder mask. Bragging is a cry to be valued. Bragging is a cry to be valued, and hearing it this way turns irritation into compassion. When someone boasts, inflates their achievements, or constantly seeks admiration, they are rarely as secure as they appear. Beneath the bragging is usually a hunger, a need to feel worthy, to be seen as enough, that ordinary life has not satisfied. Psychologists connect excessive self-promotion to insecurity rather than genuine self-worth, noting that people truly secure in themselves feel little need to advertise it. Think of someone whose constant boasting wore on you, and how, if you looked beneath it, you might have seen a person desperate to be valued, filling an inner emptiness with outer display. The bragging was a plea. A mind that understands human nature hears the need beneath the boast rather than only the boast. You do not have to admire the bragging or reward it, which only feeds the emptiness. You only have to recognize what it reveals, that a person who must constantly proclaim their worth usually doubts it, that the loud display of value often covers a quiet fear of being worthless. This explains so much, why the most boastful can be the most insecure, why genuine accomplishment often speaks softly while insecurity shouts. It also softens your irritation into understanding, since you see the frightened person beneath the performance. To understand that bragging is a cry to be valued is to hear the hidden plea inside the boast, and to meet even the most tiresome self-promotion with a measure of compassion for the insecure human, quietly asking, in the only way they know, to be seen as enough. The loudest fear being unheard. The loudest people often fear being unheard, and this understanding reframes the ones who dominate every conversation. The person who talks over others, who cannot stop, who fills every silence, is frequently driven by a deep fear that if they stop, they will disappear, that their voice does not matter unless they force it on everyone. Psychologists connect this kind of over-talking to anxiety and a hunger for validation rather than genuine confidence. Think of someone who monopolized every conversation, and how, beneath the domination, there might have lived a fear of being overlooked, a desperate need to be acknowledged. The loudness was a plea to matter. A mind that understands human nature hears this, meeting the loud not only with irritation but with some understanding. You do not have to surrender every conversation to those who dominate or ignore your own need to speak. You only have to recognize that the loudest voice often belongs to the most frightened person, that the compulsion to be heard usually grows from a fear of being invisible. This explains so much why some people cannot bear silence, why they interrupt and dominate, why the fear of not mattering can make a person impossible to quiet. It also softens your response, since you see the anxious child beneath the overbearing adult. To understand that the loudest fear being unheard is to recognize the vulnerability hidden inside domination, and to remember that behind the person who will not stop talking is often someone terrified that if they do, no one will notice they were there at all. Perfection hides a fear of judgment. Perfectionism hides a fear of judgment, and seeing this reveals the anxious person behind the flawless surface. The drive to be perfect is rarely about excellence for its own sake. Beneath it usually lies a fear that any flaw will be exposed and punished, that being less than perfect means being unworthy of acceptance. Psychologists distinguish healthy striving from this anxious perfectionism, linking the latter to a deep fear of criticism and rejection. Think of someone whose relentless perfectionism you admired, and how beneath it there might have lived a terror of being judged inadequate, a belief that only flawlessness could keep them safe. The perfection was armor against judgment. A mind that understands human nature sees the fear beneath the polish, in others and often in itself. You do not have to admire perfectionism as pure discipline or judge the perfectionist harshly. You only have to recognize what drives it, that the demand for flawlessness usually grows from a fear of exposure, that the perfect surface is protecting a person who believes they will only be accepted if they never fail. This explains so much: why perfectionists are so anxious, why they struggle to rest or to be seen as imperfect, why the fear of judgment can drive people to exhausting extremes. It also offers compassion, since you see the frightened human beneath the flawless mask. To understand that perfection hides a fear of judgment is to recognize the anxiety behind the polished surface and to meet the perfectionist, including the one you may see in the mirror, with gentleness for the fear of being found unworthy that drives the impossible pursuit. The critic is often insecure. The critic is often insecure, and this understanding takes the sting out of harsh judgment. People who are quick to criticize others, who find fault everywhere, who tear down more than they build up, are frequently struggling with their own sense of inadequacy. Diminishing others can be a way, however unconscious, of feeling larger by comparison, of managing one's own insecurity by pointing at everyone else's flaws. Psychologists note that harsh, chronic criticism of others often reflects the critic's own inner dissatisfaction more than any real failing in the criticized. Think of someone whose constant criticism wore you down, and how, beneath it, might have lived a person deeply unhappy with themselves, using others as a mirror to feel better by comparison. The criticism was about them. A mind that understands human nature hears harsh judgment differently, seeing the insecurity it may reveal about the one delivering it. You do not have to accept all criticism as truth or ignore feedback that is genuinely useful. You only have to recognize that chronic, cutting criticism often says more about the critic's inner state than about you, that the person tearing you down may be struggling to hold themselves up. This explains so much: why some people criticize compulsively, why their judgments feel more like attacks than help, why the harshest critics are often the most privately unhappy. It also protects you, since you can weigh criticism against its likely source. To understand that the critic is often insecure is to stop absorbing every harsh judgment as truth, and to see, behind the pointing finger, a person struggling with a discomfort they have not learned to face in themselves. People hide behind being busy. People hide behind being busy, using constant activity as a way to avoid what they do not want to feel or face. Busyness can be genuine, but it can also be a refuge, a way to fill every moment so completely that there is no space left for the difficult thoughts, feelings, or truths that quiet would reveal. Psychologists observe that relentless activity is sometimes a form of avoidance, a way of outrunning discomfort by never sitting still with it. Think of a time you kept yourself frantically busy to avoid facing something painful, or someone whose endless activity seemed to be fleeing from a stillness they could not bear. The busyness was an escape. A mind that understands human nature recognizes this, both in others and in itself. You do not have to condemn all busyness or assume every active person is running from something. You only have to notice when busyness is being used to avoid, when the refusal to be still is really a refusal to feel or to face. This explains so much: why some people cannot rest, why stillness makes them anxious, why they fill every gap with activity as though quiet were dangerous. It also offers a gentle prompt, since the things we are too busy to face rarely disappear, and often the wisest step is to stop and let the quiet reveal what the busyness was hiding. To understand that people hide behind being busy is to recognize activity as a possible mask for avoidance, and to ask gently of yourself and others what the constant motion might be protecting you from having to feel. The tough mask guards a soft heart. The tough mask guards a soft heart, and this is one of the most tender truths about human nature. The people who seem hardest, coldest, most armored are often protecting a sensitivity so deep that they learn to hide it behind a wall. The toughness is not the absence of feeling, but a defense of it, a shield built by someone who felt too much and was hurt for it. Psychologists find that emotional armor often develops precisely in those who are most sensitive. As a way to protect a vulnerability the world did not treat gently. Think of someone gruff and hardened who, in a rare moment, revealed a startling tenderness beneath, and how the toughness had been guarding rather than replacing their softness. The wall protected the heart. A mind that understands human nature sees past the armor to the sensitivity it defends. You do not have to break through everyone's defenses or assume all toughness hides gold. You only have to recognize that hardness is often a shield, that the most armored people are frequently the most tender underneath, protecting a heart that was hurt for being open. This explains so much: why some of the gruffest people are secretly the kindest, why armor and sensitivity so often go together, why the walls people build are usually built around something soft. It also invites patience, since the tough mask asks to be met with gentleness rather than force. To understand that the tough mask guards a soft heart is to look past the armor with compassion, and to remember that behind the hardest surfaces there is often the tenderest heart, walled away by someone who simply felt too much to leave it unguarded. We show our best and hide our mess. We show our best and hide our mess, presenting a curated version of ourselves to the world while keeping our struggles, doubts, and failures out of sight. Everyone edits, showing the highlights and concealing the difficulties, so that we constantly compare our full, messy insides to everyone else's polished outsides. Psychologists note how this comparison, sharpened by a world of curated images, leaves people feeling uniquely flawed among the seemingly flawless. Think of how you present your best self to others while hiding your private struggles, and how everyone around you is doing exactly the same, each concealing the mess behind a composed surface. The comparison was never fair. A mind that understands human nature remembers this whenever it feels lesser than others. You do not have to expose all your struggles or resent people for curating themselves, which is natural. You only have to recognize that everyone hides their mess, that the polished surfaces you compare yourself against conceal difficulties much like your own. This explains so much: why others' lives can seem so much better than yours, why comparison so reliably leaves you diminished, why we feel alone in our struggles when in truth, everyone has them. It also offers relief, since knowing that everyone hides their mess frees you from measuring your inside against their outside. To understand that we show our best and hide our mess is to stop comparing your whole self to everyone else's highlight reel, and to remember that behind every composed surface is a person with the same doubts, struggles, and messes that you keep hidden behind yours. Anger is often a mask for hurt. Anger is often a mask for hurt, and reading it this way transforms how you meet the anger of others and your own. Anger is frequently a secondary emotion, a defensive response that rises to cover a more vulnerable feeling underneath, usually pain, fear, or shame. When someone lashes out, they are often protecting a wound they cannot bear to show, because anger feels stronger and safer than hurt. Psychologists describe anger as a common cover for more painful, exposed emotions. Think of a time you snapped at someone when you were really hurt, using anger to hide a pain you did not want to reveal, or someone whose rage, you later realized, was covering a deep wound. The anger guarded the hurt. A mind that understands human nature looks beneath anger for the pain it may be masking. You do not have to accept cruelty or excuse harmful behavior. You only have to recognize that anger often covers hurt, that the person raging before you may be protecting a wound, and that your own anger, too, is frequently pain in disguise. This explains so much: why hurt people lash out, why anger so often follows rejection or shame, why meeting rage with rage misses the wound underneath. It also opens compassion, since seeing the hurt beneath the anger lets you respond to the pain rather than the fury. To understand that anger is often a mask for hurt is to look past the heat of the moment to the wound beneath it, and to meet anger, in others and in yourself, with an eye for the tender, hurting feeling it is so often struggling to hide. The need to be right hides doubt. The need to be right often hides doubt, and understanding this softens the people who cannot ever concede. Those who must always win the argument, who cannot admit being wrong, who defend their position past all reason, are frequently driven not by confidence, but by a fragile certainty that cannot bear to be questioned. A truly secure mind can say, "I might be wrong," but an insecure one clings to being right, because doubt feels like danger. Psychologists connect the rigid need to be right with insecurity, and a fear that being wrong means being inadequate. Think of someone who could never concede a point, and how, beneath the stubbornness, might have lived a fear that admitting error would expose some deeper inadequacy. The need to be right guarded a doubt. A mind that understands human nature sees this, meeting rigid certainty with less frustration and more insight. You do not have to win every argument or let others' stubbornness rule you. You only have to recognize that the desperate need to be right usually covers a fear of being wrong, that the person who cannot concede is often protecting a fragile sense of self. This explains so much: why some people argue endlessly, why admitting error feels impossible to them, why the most rigid are often the least secure. It also frees you from needing to win, since you see the fear driving their insistence. To understand that the need to be right hides doubt is to stop battling for victory against the insecure, and to recognize that the person who cannot admit being wrong is often the one most quietly afraid that they are. Control is a response to fear. Control is a response to fear, and this truth reveals the anxious person behind the controlling one. People who need to control everything, who cannot delegate, who must manage every detail and every outcome, are usually driven by a deep fear of what happens when they let go. Control is how they manage anxiety, an attempt to make an unpredictable world feel safe by gripping it tightly. Psychologists connect the need for excessive control with underlying anxiety and a fear of uncertainty. Think of someone whose controlling behavior frustrated you, and how, beneath it, might have lived a person terrified of chaos, using control to hold back a fear of everything falling apart. The control was fear in disguise. A mind that understands human nature sees the anxiety beneath the control, in others and in itself. You do not have to submit to controlling behavior or excuse its harm. You only have to recognize what drives it, that the need to control usually grows from fear, that the person gripping everything so tightly is often the one most afraid of losing their footing. This explains so much: why controlling people are so anxious, why they struggle to trust or let go, why their grip tightens precisely when they feel most afraid. It also softens your response, since you see the frightened person beneath the controlling one. To understand that control is a response to fear is to recognize the anxiety behind the need to manage everything, and to meet the controlling person, including the one you may sometimes be, with an understanding of the fear of chaos that drives the desperate, exhausting need to hold on. Indifference often hides caring. Indifference often hides caring, and this quiet truth reveals the feeling beneath a studied coldness. When someone acts as though they do not care, shrugging off what clearly matters, pretending indifference to a person or outcome they are deeply invested in, the show of not caring is frequently a defense against caring too much. It hurts less, they hope, to pretend it does not matter than to admit how much it does. Psychologists recognize this protective detachment, a way of guarding against the pain of vulnerability by performing indifference. Think of a time you acted like you did not care about something you cared about deeply, protecting yourself from the risk of showing how much it mattered, or someone whose coldness you sensed hid a wounded investment. The indifference was a shield. A mind that understands human nature looks beneath studied indifference for the caring it may conceal. You do not have to chase everyone who acts cold or assume all indifference hides warmth, since sometimes it is real. You only have to recognize that a performance of not caring is often a defense against caring too much, that the shrug can hide a wound. This explains so much: why people play it cool when they are anything but, why feigned indifference so often follows rejection, why we hide our investment to protect ourselves from hurt. It also invites gentleness, since the one acting like they do not care may be the one caring most. To understand that indifference often hides caring is to look past the cold surface with compassion, and to remember that the show of not caring is frequently the disguise of a heart that cares more than it can safely reveal. The face and the person beneath. The face and the person beneath it are what this whole tier has been quietly revealing, that behind every mask people wear is a tender, human self, protecting itself the only way it knows. Every truth here has shown a mask: the confident surface over insecurity, the toughness over softness, the anger over hurt, the control over fear, and each one, seen clearly, reveals not a villain, but a frightened, feeling human beneath. This is the great gift of understanding the masks, that they turn our judgment into compassion, our intimidation into understanding. The people whose surfaces once confused or wounded us become legible, and we see the vulnerable self. Each mask is defending. Think of how differently you will meet people now, seeing the fear beneath the bragging, the hurt beneath the anger, the doubt beneath the need to be right, meeting the person rather than only the mask. A mind that understands human nature does not use this to see through people cruelly or to feel superior. It uses it to meet others and itself with deeper compassion, knowing that everyone is protecting something tender. You do not have to strip away everyone's defenses or become everyone's therapist. You only have to carry this understanding so that the masks people wear no longer confuse or intimidate you, but reveal the human being beneath. Rest tonight in knowing that behind every face, including your own, is a person doing their best to protect a tender heart, and that a mind which sees the person beneath the mask moves through the human world with a rare and gentle compassion, meeting the frightened, feeling self that every mask, in the end, is only trying to keep safe. Everyone carries a private shame. Everyone carries a private shame, some part of themselves they believe is unacceptable and keep carefully hidden from the world. Beneath the presentable surface, nearly every person holds a secret conviction that if others truly knew some part of them, they would be rejected. This hidden shame is one of the most universal and least spoken of human experiences. Psychologists who study shame find it to be nearly universal, and note that its power comes precisely from its secrecy, from the belief that we are uniquely flawed. Think of the part of yourself you would least want anyone to know, and how certain you feel that it makes you unacceptable. And then, consider that everyone around you carries their own version of exactly that. The shame felt unique, but it was shared. A mind that understands human nature holds this truth with tenderness, both for others and for itself. You do not have to expose your shame or pretend it does not exist. You only have to recognize that everyone carries some private shame, that the secret flaw you believe sets you apart is something nearly every person shares in their own form. This explains so much: why we hide, why we fear being fully known, why shame isolates us so completely. It also offers profound relief, since knowing that everyone carries shame dissolves the loneliness of believing you are uniquely broken. To understand that everyone carries a private shame is to feel less alone in your own, and to meet others with the compassion of someone who knows that behind every composed face is a person carrying a secret they believe makes them unworthy, exactly as you carry yours. We fear being truly known. We fear being truly known even as we long for it, caught in a deep human tension between the wish to be seen and the terror of being seen. We ache to be understood and accepted as we really are, and yet we hide, because to be fully known is to risk being fully rejected. This is one of the central paradoxes of human nature, that our greatest longing and our greatest fear point at the same thing. Psychologists describe this tension between the need for connection and the fear of vulnerability that connection requires. Think of how much you long to be truly understood, and how, when someone gets close to actually knowing you, a part of you wants to retreat, to hide the parts that might not be accepted. The longing and the fear pulled at once. A mind that understands human nature holds this tension with compassion rather than judgment. You do not have to resolve the paradox or force yourself into total openness. You only have to recognize it, that the fear of being known is not a flaw, but a natural response to the risk that real intimacy carries. This explains so much: why we hide from the very closeness we crave, why vulnerability feels so dangerous, why we can feel lonely, even among people who would accept us if we let them. It also offers gentleness, since the fear is universal and human. To understand that we fear being truly known is to make peace with your own reluctance to be seen, and to recognize that the courage to let someone know you, despite the fear, is one of the bravest and most connecting things a person can do. The thing we hide owns us most. The thing we hide owns us most, because what we refuse to face does not disappear, but rules us from the shadows. The parts of ourselves we bury, deny, and keep secret do not lose their power by being hidden. They gain it, running our behavior from below awareness, leaking out in ways we cannot control. Psychologists have long observed that what we suppress tends to control us more than what we face, that the disowned parts of ourselves govern us precisely because we will not look at them. Think of a fear or a shame you have refused to face, and how it has shaped your choices from the shadows, steering you away from certain things, driving reactions you could not explain. The hidden thing was running you. A mind that understands human nature knows that facing what we hide is how we reclaim power over it. You do not have to expose every secret to the world or force yourself to confront everything at once. You only have to recognize that what you refuse to face controls you more than what you acknowledge, that the hidden thing rules precisely because it stays hidden. This explains so much: why avoidance strengthens our fears, why the things we will not look at grow more powerful, why what we bury shapes us most. It also offers a path to freedom, since bringing the hidden thing into awareness, gently, begins to loosen its grip. To understand that the thing we hide owns us most is to see that facing what we fear is how we free ourselves from it, and that what is brought into the light at last can no longer rule us from the dark. We all feel like frauds sometimes. We all feel like frauds sometimes, secretly certain that we do not deserve our place, our success, or others' good opinion of us, and that we are somehow getting away with something. This feeling visits nearly everyone, the sense that we are less than we appear and that discovery is only a matter of time. It is one of the most common and least admitted human experiences. Psychologists find that most people, including the highly capable, experience this fraudulent feeling, each convinced they are the exception hiding among the genuinely deserving. Think of a time you felt like a fraud. Sure, you did not really deserve what you had achieved, and how isolating that feeling was. And then consider that the people around you, the confident and accomplished ones, feel exactly the same. The fraud feeling was shared. A mind that understands human nature takes comfort in this near-universal experience. You do not have to wait until the fraudulent feeling disappears to accept your place, since it may never fully vanish. You only have to recognize that feeling like a fraud is not evidence that you are one, that this feeling visits nearly everyone, including the people whose competence you never doubt. This explains so much. Why so many capable people feel undeserving. Why success rarely cures the feeling. Why we each think we are the only imposter in the room. It also connects you to everyone, dissolving the isolation of the feeling. To understand that we all feel like frauds sometimes is to stop taking the feeling as truth, and to recognize that the sense of not deserving your place is not a private failing, but a shared and deeply human experience. Envy points to what we want. Envy points to what we want, revealing our own hidden desires in the mirror of what we resent in others. The sharp, uncomfortable feeling of envy, which we are taught to be ashamed of and to hide, is actually a signal, showing us what we long for by pointing at those who have it. Rather than a mere failing, envy can be information, a map of our own unspoken wishes. Psychologists suggest that envy, examined honestly, reveals the values and desires we have not admitted even to ourselves. Think of who you envy, and what specifically you envy in them, and how that envy points precisely at something you want, but have not let yourself pursue or admit wanting. The envy was a signpost. A mind that understands human nature reads its envy rather than only condemning it. You do not have to act on every envious feeling or let envy curdle into resentment, which poisons. You only have to recognize what it reveals, that envy points at your own hidden longings, that what you resent in others often shows what you secretly want for yourself. This explains so much. Why envy stings so specifically, why we envy some people and not others, why the feeling, though uncomfortable, carries useful information. It also offers a gentler path, since envy understood can become clarity about your own desires rather than bitterness toward others. To understand that envy points to what we want is to read the uncomfortable feeling as a map rather than a moral failing, and to let your envy quietly show you the longings you have not yet allowed yourself to name or pursue. We hide the parts we were shamed for. We hide the parts we were shamed for, tucking away whatever aspects of ourselves once drew disapproval, mockery, or rejection, until we lose access to them entirely. The traits, feelings, and expressions that were met with shame in our early lives get pushed out of sight so that we abandon parts of our own nature to avoid the pain of being shamed again. Psychologists connect this to how shame shapes the self, teaching us to disown whatever was punished. Think of a part of yourself, a feeling, a way of being, an expression of who you are that was mocked or rejected long ago, and how you learned to hide it, perhaps so well that you lost touch with it. The shaming buried the trait. A mind that understands human nature recognizes this and holds compassion for the parts it learned to hide. You do not have to force every hidden part back into the open or blame others for all your concealment. You only have to recognize that the things you hide about yourself were often hidden for a reason, because they were once shamed, and that those parts are not actually shameful, only wounded. This explains so much. Why we suppress certain feelings. Why some parts of us feel forbidden. Why we abandon aspects of ourselves that were met with disapproval. It also offers a path to wholeness, since the parts we were shamed for can, gently, be reclaimed. To understand that we hide the parts we were shamed for is to see our concealment with compassion, and to recognize that reclaiming the parts of yourself that were once shamed is not indulgence, but a healing return to your own full nature. Everyone fears not being enough. Everyone fears not being enough, carrying beneath their striving a quiet dread that they are fundamentally insufficient, and that no achievement will ever finally settle it. This fear runs beneath much of human behavior, driving the endless pursuit of more, the need for approval, the inability to rest. At its root is a doubt about basic worth that few people escape. Psychologists find this fear of inadequacy to be one of the most common and powerful drivers of human striving and anxiety. Think of how much of your own effort has been quietly aimed at proving you are enough, and how the proof never fully arrives, the fear returning after each achievement. And then, consider that nearly everyone around you carries the same fear. The dread of not being enough was universal. A mind that understands human nature holds this fear with compassion rather than shame. You do not have to conquer the fear through achievement, which does not work, or pretend it is not there. You only have to recognize that the fear of not being enough is nearly universal, that the people around you, however accomplished, carry the same quiet doubt about their worth. This explains so much. Why we strive endlessly, why success rarely satisfies, why the need to prove ourselves can never quite be filled from outside. It also offers relief, since knowing the fear is universal loosens its grip. To understand that everyone fears not being enough is to stop believing your own inadequacy is uniquely real, and to recognize that beneath the striving of every person, including the ones you most admire, is the same tender fear that they, too, might not be enough. The secret we keep from ourselves. The secret we keep from ourselves is often the deepest one, because the mind is remarkably skilled at hiding truths from its own awareness when they are too painful to face. We do not only hide things from others, we hide them from ourselves, burying feelings, desires, and truths so effectively that we genuinely do not know they are there. Psychologists have long described this self-deception, the way the mind protects itself by keeping certain truths out of conscious view. Think of a time you discovered a feeling you had been carrying without knowing it, an anger, a grief, a longing that had been shaping you all along beneath your awareness. The secret had been kept from yourself. A mind that understands human nature approaches its own depths with humility, knowing that not everything within is visible to it. You do not have to excavate every hidden truth at once, or distrust all your self-knowledge. You only have to recognize that you may be keeping secrets from yourself, that some of what drives you lives below your own awareness, and that honest self-reflection sometimes reveals what you did not know you held. This explains so much: why we act against our own understanding, why feelings surface that we did not know we had, why we can be strangers to ourselves. It also invites a gentle curiosity, a willingness to wonder what you might be hiding from your own view. To understand that we keep secrets from ourselves is to hold your self-knowledge humbly, and to approach your own hidden depths with the patience and compassion of someone who knows that the truths we bury from ourselves are usually the ones that most need, someday, to be gently seen. We bury what we cannot feel. We bury what we cannot feel, pushing down emotions that are too overwhelming or too dangerous to experience, where they remain, unfelt, but not gone. When a feeling is too much to bear, especially in childhood, the mind protects us by burying it, so that we do not feel it, but neither do we release it. It stays, buried alive, shaping us from below. Psychologists find that suppressed emotions do not disappear but persist, affecting mood, body, and behavior in ways we do not connect to their source. Think of a grief or a fear you could not afford to feel at the time, and how it may have stayed with you, surfacing later as a heaviness, a tension, a reaction that seemed to come from nowhere. The buried feeling was still there. A mind that understands human nature treats its buried emotions with gentleness rather than judgment. You do not have to force every buried feeling to the surface or relive old pain recklessly. You only have to recognize that what you could not feel did not disappear, that buried emotions remain and shape you until they are, in their own time and safely, allowed to be felt. This explains so much: why old feelings surface unexpectedly, why the body holds what the mind suppressed, why we carry emotions we never consciously experienced. It also offers a path to relief, since feelings safely felt can finally be released. To understand that we bury what we cannot feel is to meet your own buried emotions with compassion, and to recognize that the feelings you could not afford to feel are still waiting, patiently, to be met at last with the gentleness they always deserved. Shame grows in the dark and silence. Shame grows in the dark and silence, feeding on secrecy and shrinking in the light of being shared, which is why hiding our shame only makes it stronger. Shame's power comes from isolation, from the belief that we are uniquely and unacceptably flawed, and that belief can only survive as long as the shame stays hidden. Spoken aloud to someone safe, shame loses much of its grip. Researchers who study shame find that it withers when brought into connection, that sharing it with someone who responds with empathy dissolves its power. Think of a shame you carried alone for years, and how, if you ever finally spoke it to someone who met it with kindness, it suddenly felt smaller, more human, less like a monster. The light shrank the shame. A mind that understands human nature knows that shame kept secret only grows. You do not have to broadcast your shame to everyone or share it carelessly, which can wound. You only have to recognize that shame thrives on secrecy and dies in the light of safe connection. That what feels unspeakable loses its power the moment it is spoken to someone who responds with compassion. This explains so much: why hiding our shame deepens it, why secrecy isolates us, why being met with acceptance can heal what we thought unforgivable. It also offers a path out, since shame shared with the right person begins to dissolve. To understand that shame grows in the dark, and silence is to see that hiding it feeds it, and that the courage to speak our shame to someone safe is often the very thing that finally sets us free from it. We long for what we push away. We long for what we push away, often rejecting the very things we most deeply want, because wanting them feels too vulnerable or too dangerous. We push away love we crave, opportunities we desire, connection we long for, protecting ourselves from the risk of wanting by pretending we do not want it all. This self-protective rejection of our own desires is one of the quieter tragedies of human nature. Psychologists connect this to a fear of vulnerability, the way we defend against the pain of longing by denying the longing itself. Think of something you deeply wanted and pushed away: a person, a chance, a form of closeness, protecting yourself from the risk of reaching for it by convincing yourself you did not want it. The pushing away hid the longing. A mind that understands human nature recognizes this pattern with compassion. You do not have to grab at everything you want recklessly or ignore genuine reasons for caution. You only have to recognize when you are pushing away something you actually long for, when the rejection is really a defense against the vulnerability of wanting. This explains so much: why we sabotage what we desire, why we reject the love we crave, why we protect ourselves from our own longings. It also offers a gentler path, since seeing the pattern lets you ask whether you are truly uninterested or only afraid to want. To understand that we long for what we push away is to notice when self-protection is masquerading as indifference, and to consider, gently, whether the thing you are pushing away is actually the thing your heart most quietly longs for. The hidden self that runs us. The hidden self that runs us is what this whole tier has been revealing: the parts we bury, deny, and keep secret that quietly govern our lives from below awareness. Every truth here has pointed to something hidden: the private shame, the buried feeling, the disowned desire, the fear of not being enough. And together, they form a hidden self that shapes us more than the self we show. This is the great insight of this tier: that we are run not only by what we know about ourselves, but by what we hide, even from our own eyes. The wisdom traditions and modern psychology agree that becoming whole requires turning gently toward these hidden parts rather than away from them. Think of how much of your life has been shaped by things you could not face, hidden shames and buried feelings steering you from the shadows, and how bringing even a little of it into awareness has loosened its grip. A mind that understands human nature turns toward its hidden self with compassion, not to expose or punish it, but to know it, because what is known can be worked with, and what is hidden cannot. You do not have to excavate everything or force painful truths into the light before you are ready. You only have to recognize that a hidden self shapes you and to meet it over time with gentleness rather than fear. Rest tonight in knowing that the parts of yourself you have hidden are not monsters but wounded, human things waiting to be met with compassion, and that a mind willing to know its own hidden self, gently and in its own time, is moving toward a wholeness that hiding could never give. Everyone is capable of cruelty. Everyone is capable of cruelty under the right conditions, and this uncomfortable truth is one of the most important to understand about human nature. We like to believe that cruelty belongs only to bad people, that we ourselves could never. But psychology tells a harder story, that ordinary people, placed in the wrong situation, will do things they would have sworn they never could. Studies of obedience and of assigned roles have shown decent people committing acts of striking cruelty, moved not by evil character, but by circumstance. Think of how the same person can be gentle in one setting and harsh in another. How a mob does what no individual would. How situation shapes behavior more than we admit. A mind that understands human nature holds this without despair, seeing it as a call to humility rather than a reason for cynicism. You do not have to believe people are secretly monsters or lose faith in human goodness, which is just as real. You only have to recognize that cruelty is a human potential, not a foreign one, that the line between decent and cruel runs through every person and is crossed more by circumstance than we like to think. This explains so much: why good people do terrible things in bad systems, why we must guard the conditions that bring out our worst. It also invites humility, since knowing your own capacity for harm is what helps you resist it. To understand that everyone is capable of cruelty is not to give up on people, but to hold both their goodness and their darkness honestly, and to take responsibility for the conditions that call one or the other forward. Self-interest runs deep in us. Self-interest runs deeper in us than we like to admit, quietly shaping even our most generous-seeming acts, and facing this honestly makes us wiser about ourselves and others. We prefer to see our motives as pure, but much of what we do, even our kindness, carries a thread of self-interest, a wish to feel good, to be seen well, to be repaid in some form. This is not proof that people are selfish monsters, only that self-interest is woven through human motivation more thoroughly than we admit. Psychologists find that even altruism often carries hidden rewards: the good feeling, the reputation, the relief of guilt. Think of a generous act of your own, and how, if honest, you might find some self-interest tucked inside it, a wish to be seen as good, to feel worthy, to be liked. The self-interest did not erase the good. A mind that understands human nature accepts this without cynicism. You do not have to conclude that all kindness is fake or that no one truly cares, which is false. You only have to recognize that self-interest threads through even our best acts, that pure selflessness is rarer than we pretend, and that this is simply human. This explains so much: why people help most when it also serves them, why pure motives are hard to find, why we flatter ourselves about our reasons. It also invites honesty, a willingness to see our own mixed motives clearly. To understand that self-interest runs deep is not to despair of human goodness, but to hold it realistically, recognizing that kindness threaded with self-interest is still kindness and still worth giving. We behave better when watched. We behave better when we are watched, And the honest recognition of this reveals how much of our morality depends on the eyes of others. People are consistently more honest, more generous, and more careful when they believe someone is observing them, and more prone to cutting corners when they are sure no one is. Even the subtle suggestion of being watched, a picture of eyes, a mirror, shifts behavior toward the good. Psychologists find this observer effect on morality to be strong and widespread. Think of how differently people behave in public versus in private, how honesty rises when there are witnesses, how the anonymous crowd does what the named individual would not. The watching shape the conduct. A mind that understands human nature holds this without despair, seeing it as a call to build genuine character. You do not have to conclude that no one is truly good, or that all virtue is performance, which goes too far. You only have to recognize how much ordinary morality leans on being seen, and to ask what kind of person you are when no one is watching, since that is the truest measure. This explains so much: why anonymity breeds bad behavior, why surveillance changes conduct, why the private self and the public self can differ so sharply. It also offers a worthy aim, since true character is doing right when unobserved. To understand that we behave better when watched is to see how fragile much of our virtue is, and to strive, quietly, to become someone whose goodness does not depend on an audience, but holds firm in the dark, where only you can see. We resent those we have wronged. We resent those we have wronged, a strange and dark quirk of human nature, in which we come to dislike the very people we have hurt. It seems backward that harming someone should make us like them less. But the mind cannot easily hold the idea that it wronged a good person, so it quietly decides the person must have deserved it, and resentment follows. Psychologists explain this through cognitive dissonance, the way we adjust our feelings to justify our actions. Think of how someone who treated you badly seemed to grow colder toward you afterward, or how you may have found fault in someone you had wronged, your mind manufacturing reasons they deserved it. The harm bred the resentment. A mind that understands human nature recognizes this uncomfortable pattern in itself and others. You do not have to condemn all of humanity or assume everyone is this way in every case. You only have to recognize the pattern, that having wronged someone can make us resent rather than love them, because it is easier than facing our own wrongdoing. This explains so much: why people are often coldest to those they have hurt, why guilt curdles into blame, why the wronged are so often further mistreated by those who wronged them. It also invites vigilance, a willingness to notice when you are inventing reasons to dislike someone you have failed. To understand that we resent those we have wronged is to catch this dark reflex in yourself, and to choose, instead, the harder and more honest path of facing what you have done, rather than blaming the person you did it to. Comfort often beats the truth. Comfort often beats the truth, because people generally prefer a reassuring lie to a painful reality, and understanding this explains much about what people believe and why. We like to think we want the truth, but when the truth is uncomfortable and a comforting falsehood is available, most people, most of the time, quietly choose comfort. We believe what soothes us, what fits our hopes, what lets us avoid pain, more readily than what is simply true. Psychologists find that motivated reasoning bends our beliefs toward what we want rather than what is real. Think of a comforting belief you held past the point of evidence, or how hard it is to accept a painful truth about someone you love, or how people cling to reassuring stories against the facts. Comfort won over truth. A mind that understands human nature holds this honestly, in others, and in itself. You do not have to become harshly cynical or assume no one values truth, since some genuinely do. You only have to recognize the pull of comfort, how readily we all prefer the soothing story to the hard fact, and to notice when you are choosing comfort over reality. This explains so much: why people believe what they wish were true, why uncomfortable truths spread slowly, why the reassuring lie so often wins. It also invites courage, a willingness to face hard truths even when comfort beckons. To understand that comfort often beats the truth is to catch yourself choosing the soothing story, and to find the rare and valuable courage to prefer what is real, even when what is real is harder to bear than the comfort you could have chosen instead. We are hardest on those we love. We are hardest on those we love, saving our worst moods, sharpest words, and least patience for the very people closest to us. And this painful truth deserves honest reckoning. The people we love most often receive the worst of us because we feel safe with them, because we know they will not leave, because the mask we hold up for the world comes off at home. We wound those closest precisely because they are closest. Psychologists note that we often direct our accumulated stress and frustration at our safest relationships. Think of how you may be more patient with a stranger than with your own family, how the people you love most see your worst temper, how safety can breed carelessness. The closeness invited the harshness. A mind that understands human nature faces this without shame, but with resolve. You do not have to conclude that love makes us cruel or despair of close relationships. You only have to recognize the pattern, that we often treat those we love worst because we feel safest with them, and to guard against taking our dearest people for granted. This explains so much: why home sees our worst selves, why we hurt those we would never want to hurt, why the safe relationship absorbs our stress. It also invites care, a conscious choice to offer our best, not our worst, to those who matter most. To understand that we are hardest on those we love is to notice when you are wounding the people closest to you simply because they are safe, and to choose deliberately to give your patience and kindness first to those who deserve it most. Most people never question life. Most people never truly question the life they are living, moving through their days on inherited assumptions, unexamined beliefs, and borrowed goals they never chose. And recognizing this is both sobering and freeing. It is uncomfortable to admit how much of a life can be lived on autopilot, pursuing what we were told to want, believing what we were raised to believe, rarely stopping to ask whether any of it is truly ours. The examined life is rarer than we like to think. Philosophers have long observed how few people genuinely question the assumptions they live by. Think of how much of your own life has run on inherited scripts, goals you never chose, beliefs you never tested, and how rarely most people pause to ask whether they are living their own life or someone else's. The unexamined script ran quietly. A mind that understands human nature sees this without contempt, as a call to wake up rather than to judge. You do not have to have every answer or tear your whole life apart. You only have to recognize how easily a life can be lived unquestioned, and to ask, sometimes, whether your goals, beliefs, and path are truly yours. This explains so much: why people follow scripts that do not fulfill them, why so few examine their assumptions, why we can reach the end of a road we never chose. It also offers freedom, since a life questioned can be a life reclaimed. To understand that most people never question life is to gently question your own, and to make sure the life you are living is one you have actually chosen, rather than one you simply inherited and never thought to examine. We remember wounds over kindness. We remember wounds over kindness, holding on to the hurts done to us far more tightly than the kindnesses. And this imbalance shapes our relationships and our view of the world. A single cruel remark can outlast 100 kind ones. A betrayal can eclipse years of loyalty because the mind, wired for survival, files threats and injuries more deeply than comforts. Psychologists call this the negativity bias, and it means our memories of others are weighted toward their worst moments. Think of how one hurtful thing someone did can overshadow all the good. How you may remember a slight for years while forgetting countless kindnesses. How the wound stays sharp while the warmth fades. The hurt was remembered, the kindness lost. A mind that understands human nature corrects for this, in judging others and in remembering its own life. You do not have to ignore real harms or pretend wounds do not matter. You only have to recognize that your memory tilts toward the negative, that you likely hold others' worst moments more vividly than their best, and to weigh the whole rather than only the wounds. This explains so much: why grudges outlast gratitude, why one betrayal can define a relationship, why we see people through their failures. It also offers grace, since deliberately remembering the kindnesses can rebalance an unfair account. To understand that we remember wounds over kindness is to correct for a bias that darkens your view of others, and to choose, consciously, to hold the good alongside the bad, so that no one, including yourself, is remembered only by their worst moments. People rarely truly change. People rarely truly change, at least not quickly or easily, and accepting this hard truth spares us a great deal of disappointment. We want to believe that people can transform, that the person who keeps hurting us will finally become who we hope they are. But deep change is rare, slow, and usually happens only when a person genuinely wants it and works hard for it. Waiting for someone to change is often waiting for something that will not come. Psychologists find that lasting personality change is possible but difficult, and far rarer than the hope of it. Think of how often you have waited for someone to become different, believing each promise, and how rarely the real lasting change actually arrived. The hope outran the change. A mind that understands human nature holds this without cruelty. You do not have to conclude that no one can ever grow, since some do, or abandon all hope for people. You only have to recognize that deep change is rare and slow, that it is wiser to respond to who someone consistently is than to who you hope they might become. This explains so much: why patterns repeat, why promises to change so often fail, why we suffer waiting for transformations that never come. It also protects you, since accepting who someone is lets you make clear decisions rather than living on hope. To understand that people rarely truly change is to stop staking your life on a transformation that may never arrive, and to meet people as they actually and consistently are, while leaving room, without depending on it, for the rare and genuine change that does sometimes come. We all think we are the good one. We all think we are the good one, the reasonable one, the one in the right. And this near universal conviction explains an enormous amount of human conflict. Almost no one experiences themselves as the villain. In nearly every disagreement, both sides feel justified. Both believe they are the fair and reasonable party. Both cast the other as the problem. This shared conviction of our own goodness is one of the most common and most blinding features of human nature. Psychologists find that most people rate themselves as more moral, fair, and reasonable than average, a statistical impossibility. Think of a conflict where you were certain you were in the right, and how the other person was equally certain they were. Each of you, the hero of your own version. Both felt like the good one. A mind that understands human nature holds its own sense of righteousness humbly. You do not have to abandon all moral judgment or assume you are always wrong. You only have to recognize that everyone, including you, tends to believe they are the good and reasonable one, and that this certainty is not proof. This explains so much why conflicts feel so intractable, why both sides feel wronged, why we so rarely see our own part. It also invites humility, a willingness to consider that the other person feels just as justified as you do. To understand that we all think we are the good one is to hold your own certainty of being right a little more lightly, and to approach conflict with the humbling awareness that the person across from you believes, just as surely as you do, that they are the reasonable one. Suffering does not always ennoble. Suffering does not always ennoble us, and this honest truth corrects a comforting myth that can add cruelty to pain. We like to believe that hardship makes people better, wiser, stronger, and sometimes it does. But suffering can also harden, embitter, and diminish. And the idea that pain always improves us can shame those whom it has simply hurt. Suffering is not a reliable teacher, and its lessons are not guaranteed. Psychologists find that while some grow through adversity, others are worn down by it, and that growth is a possibility, not a promise. Think of how some people emerge from hardship gentler and wiser, while others emerge harder and more closed, the same suffering producing opposite results. The pain did not automatically ennoble. A mind that understands human nature holds this honestly and compassionately. You do not have to deny that growth through hardship is real, since it can be, or romanticize suffering as always meaningful. You only have to recognize that pain does not automatically make us better, that suffering can harm as well as teach, and that no one should be shamed for being wounded rather than improved by it. This explains so much: why some hardship breaks people, why the myth of redemptive suffering can be cruel, why growth requires more than pain alone. It also offers compassion, both for others and for yourself, releasing the shame of not having been ennobled by your wounds. To understand that suffering does not always ennoble is to stop demanding that pain justify itself with growth, and to meet those who have simply been hurt, including yourself, with compassion rather than the cruel expectation that suffering should have made them better. Death is the truth we avoid. Death is the truth we most avoid, the one certainty of every human life that we spend enormous energy not thinking about, and facing it honestly, even gently, can transform how we live. We know we will die, and we know everyone we love will die, and yet we organize our lives around not looking at it, distracting ourselves, denying it, pushing it to the edges of awareness. This avoidance is deeply human and quietly costly. Psychologists studying our relationship with mortality find that the denial of death shapes an astonishing amount of human behavior beneath the surface. Think of how rarely death is spoken of, how we look away from it, how the awareness of it surfaces, only to be quickly pushed back down. The great certainty stayed hidden. A mind that understands human nature can turn toward this truth without being crushed by it. You do not have to dwell morbidly on death or let it darken your days. You only have to recognize how much you avoid it and to allow, sometimes, a gentle awareness of life's impermanence, which, rather than depressing, can clarify what matters. This explains so much: why we distract ourselves so relentlessly, why we struggle to face loss, why the denial of death runs beneath so much of what we do. It also offers a gift, since remembering that life ends makes its living more precious. To understand that death is the truth we avoid is to turn, gently, toward the one certainty we spend our lives fleeing, and to let the quiet awareness of life's end deepen, rather than darken, the preciousness of the life you are living now. The dark truths seen clearly. The dark truths seen clearly do not make us cynical, but wise, and that is the crucial gift of this tier. Every truth here has faced something uncomfortable about human nature: our capacity for cruelty, our self-interest, our resentments, our avoidance of death, and it would be easy to let such honesty curdle into cynicism. But that is not its purpose. The point of facing the darker truths is not to lose faith in people, but to see them whole, and to love them and ourselves with open eyes rather than illusions. Wisdom traditions have always held that real compassion includes clear sight, that we understand people best when we neither idealize nor condemn them. Think of how much steadier your relationships become when you expect people to be human, capable of both good and bad, rather than demanding they be perfect and being shattered when they are not. A mind that understands human nature holds the darkness and the light together. You do not have to choose between naive faith and bitter cynicism, since both are distortions. You only have to see people honestly, their goodness and their darkness alike, and to meet them with a compassion that is not blind. This is the mark of real maturity: to know the worst of human nature and still choose warmth, to see clearly and love anyway. Rest tonight in knowing that facing the darker truths has not made you colder, but wiser, and that a mind which can hold the full, honest picture of human nature, its cruelty and its kindness, its selfishness and its love, is finally able to meet the world and everyone in it with a compassion that is clear-eyed, unshaken, and real. The need to matter drives us all. The need to matter drives us all, running beneath nearly every human motivation, because more than almost anything, people long to feel that their existence means something to someone. Behind the pursuit of success, love, recognition, and belonging lies this single deep hunger to matter, to make a difference, to not be invisible or replaceable. It is one of the most fundamental forces in human nature. Psychologists find that the sense of mattering, of being significant to others, is essential to well-being and deeply protective against despair. Think of how much of what you do is quietly aimed at mattering to someone, at being needed, valued, remembered, and how painful it is to feel that you do not matter at all. The hunger to matter drove so much. A mind that understands human nature sees this longing everywhere, beneath the surface of countless behaviors. You do not have to be ashamed of your need to matter, which is deeply human, or chase significance in ways that never satisfy. You only have to recognize the hunger, in yourself and others, that so much striving is really a wish to matter, and that helping others feel they matter is one of the greatest gifts you can give. This explains so much: why we fear insignificance, why being needed feels so good, why feeling unimportant wounds so deeply. It also offers a path to connection, since making others feel they matter meets their deepest need. To understand that the need to matter drives us all is to see the tender hunger beneath so much human behavior and to answer it where you can by helping the people around you feel that they truly matter. We are built for connection. We are built for connection, wired from birth to seek closeness with others, because for the human animal, connection is not a luxury, but a fundamental need as real as food or shelter. We are among the most social creatures on Earth, and our brains, bodies, and emotions are shaped by our bonds with others. Isolation harms us, and connection heals us at the deepest biological level. Researchers find that the quality of our relationships is one of the strongest predictors of health, happiness, and even longevity. Think of how nourished you feel after genuine connection and how depleted after too much isolation, how a single warm conversation can lift a whole day. Connection was not optional. It was nourishment. A mind that understands human nature treats its need for others with respect. You do not have to be endlessly social or ashamed of needing people, which some cultures wrongly frame as weakness. You only have to recognize that you are built for connection, that your need for others is not a flaw, but your nature, and that tending your relationships is tending your very survival and well-being. This explains so much. Why loneliness wounds us, why we thrive in warm relationships, why isolation is so damaging. It also offers direction, since prioritizing genuine connection is one of the surest paths to a good life. To understand that we are built for connection is to honor your need for others as the deep and healthy thing it is, and to recognize that reaching for closeness is not weakness, but the fulfillment of one of the most fundamental drives of human nature. Meaning matters more than pleasure. Meaning matters more than pleasure in the end, because a life of comfort without purpose leaves us empty, while a life of meaning can sustain us even through hardship. We chase pleasure, thinking it will make us happy, but pleasure fades, and a life built only on it grows hollow. What truly sustains us is meaning, the sense that our life matters, that we are part of something, that our struggles serve a purpose. Psychologists distinguish the fleeting happiness of pleasure from the deeper well-being of a meaningful life, and find that meaning sustains us where pleasure cannot. Think of how empty pure comfort can feel, and how a difficult but meaningful pursuit can fulfill you far more than easy pleasure ever did. Meaning nourished where pleasure could not. A mind that understands human nature values meaning above mere comfort. You do not have to reject pleasure, which has its place, or force meaning where it does not fit. You only have to recognize that meaning sustains us more deeply than pleasure, that a life of comfort without purpose grows empty, and that pursuing what is meaningful, even when hard, nourishes us in ways ease never can. This explains so much. Why the comfortable can be miserable, why meaningful struggle fulfills us, why pleasure alone never satisfies. It also offers guidance, since building a life around meaning rather than mere comfort leads to deeper contentment. To understand that meaning matters more than pleasure is to aim your life toward what is significant rather than merely comfortable, and to recognize that the deepest fulfillment comes not from a life of ease, but from a life that means something. We seek to be understood. We seek to be understood above almost everything, longing for someone to truly grasp who we are, what we feel, and what we mean, because to be understood is to be less alone. Being understood is one of the deepest human hungers, more than being agreed with, more than being praised. We ache for the experience of another person genuinely comprehending our inner world. Psychologists find that feeling understood is central to close relationships and to our sense of connection and well-being. Think of the profound relief of being truly understood by someone, of feeling that they grasped what you meant beneath your words, and how rare and nourishing that experience is. Being understood dissolves the loneliness. A mind that understands human nature recognizes this longing in itself and in everyone. You do not have to be understood by everyone or expect anyone to grasp you completely. You only have to recognize the depth of this need, that to be understood is one of the greatest human hungers, and that offering genuine understanding to others is one of the most connecting gifts you can give. This explains so much. Why we feel so alone when misunderstood. Why being truly grasped feels like coming home. Why we return again and again to those who understand us. It also offers a path to closeness, since seeking to understand others deeply is the surest way to connect. To understand that we seek to be understood is to recognize the loneliness that misunderstanding creates, and the connection that understanding heals, and to offer others the rare gift of genuinely trying to grasp who they are and what they truly mean. Love is the deepest human need. Love is the deepest human need, beneath all the others, the fundamental hunger to give and receive love that shapes us from birth to death. However we dress it up in other pursuits, most of what we long for comes back to this: to love and be loved, to be held in someone's care, and to hold others in ours. It is the need that underlies nearly all the rest. Researchers across psychology find that love and deep attachment are among the most powerful forces in human life, essential to our development, health, and happiness. Think of how, beneath your other desires, lies the simple longing to love and be loved, and how the moments of deepest fulfillment in your life have almost always involved love in some form. Love was underneath it all. A mind that understands human nature honors this deepest of needs. You do not have to find love in only one form or feel ashamed of longing for it. You only have to recognize that love is the deepest human need, that beneath your striving and your fears lives this fundamental hunger, and that giving and receiving love is close to the whole point of a human life. This explains so much why love moves us more than anything, why its loss devastates us, why we spend our lives seeking it. It also offers clarity, since orienting your life toward love, in all its forms, aligns you with your deepest nature. To understand that love is the deepest human need is to recognize the longing beneath all your longings and to give your life, wherever you can, to the loving and being loved that is, in the end, what every human heart is reaching for. We long to leave something behind. We long to leave something behind, to know that our existence mattered beyond our own lifetime, that some trace of us, some good we did, some person we shaped, will outlast us. Beneath the awareness of our mortality lies this quiet wish for a kind of continuation, to contribute something that endures, to not simply vanish without a mark. It is one of the gentler, deep drivers of human nature. Psychologists studying our later years find a deep human need to feel we have contributed something lasting, to leave the world a little different for our having been here. Think of the quiet satisfaction of knowing you have helped someone, created something, or shaped a life that will continue after you, and how that sense of contribution nourishes something deep. The wish to leave a mark was real. A mind that understands human nature honors this longing without being ruled by ego. You do not have to achieve fame or grand monuments, since the most lasting marks are often quiet ones, You only have to recognize the wish to leave something behind, that we long to matter beyond our own span, and that the good we do and the love we give are the truest legacy. This explains so much: why we want to contribute, why we hope to be remembered, why leaving something good behind brings deep peace. It also offers direction, since the most meaningful legacy is usually the love and good we pass on. To understand that we long to leave something behind is to recognize the wish for continuation in your own heart, and to find peace in knowing that the kindness you give and the lives you touch are a legacy that quietly outlasts you. Growth is a quiet human hunger. Growth is a quiet human hunger, a deep drive to develop, learn, and become more than we were, that lives in us alongside our need for safety and comfort. We are not built only to rest and remain the same. Something in us reaches toward growth, toward becoming, toward realizing more of our potential. And when that reaching is blocked, we feel stifled and small. Psychologists describe this drive toward growth and self-realization as one of the deepest human motivations. Think of the quiet satisfaction of learning something new, overcoming a challenge, becoming more capable than you were, and how stagnation, by contrast, feels like a slow suffocation. The hunger to grow was real. A mind that understands human nature honors this drive without being tyrannized by it. You do not have to constantly improve or treat rest as failure, since growth includes rest. You only have to recognize the human hunger to grow, that we are built to develop and become, and that honoring this drive, gently, is part of a fulfilling life. This explains so much: why we feel stifled when stuck, why learning and challenge fulfill us, why we reach for more than mere comfort. It also offers direction, since making room for genuine growth, in whatever form fits you, nourishes something deep. To understand that growth is a quiet human hunger is to honor your own drive to become, and to recognize that alongside your need for safety lives a real and healthy longing to grow, learn, and realize more of who you are capable of being. We need to feel free. We need to feel free, to sense that our choices are our own, that we are not merely controlled or trapped, because the experience of freedom is a deep human need woven into our nature. When we feel our autonomy is respected, we thrive. And when we feel controlled, coerced, or trapped, something in us rebels or withers. The need for a sense of agency over our own lives runs deep. Psychologists identify autonomy, the sense that our actions are self-chosen, as one of the fundamental needs underlying human motivation and well-being. Think of how energized you feel when your choices are your own, and how something in you resists when you feel controlled, even when the control is meant well. The need for freedom was real. A mind that understands human nature honors this need, in itself and others. You do not have to reject all structure or resist every limit, since some are necessary. You only have to recognize the deep need to feel free, that autonomy is essential to human flourishing, and that respecting others' sense of freedom and honoring your own meets a fundamental need. This explains so much: why people resist control, why even good advice can trigger resistance when it feels imposed, why freedom matters so deeply. It also offers guidance, since honoring autonomy, yours and others, supports genuine well-being. To understand that we need to feel free is to recognize the deep human hunger for agency over one's own life, and to honor, in yourself and in those around you, the fundamental need to feel that one's choices are truly, freely, one's own. Purpose carries us through pain. Purpose carries us through pain, giving us the strength to endure hardship that would otherwise break us. Because a person with a reason to endure can survive almost any difficulty. When we have a purpose, a why, a reason that matters to us, we can bear suffering that would crush someone without one. Purpose transforms pain from meaningless torment into something we can carry. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, who survived the darkest of conditions, observed that those who had a meaning to live for endured what others could not. Think of how much more you can bear when your suffering serves a purpose you believe in, and how unbearable pain becomes when it feels meaningless. Purpose made the pain endurable. A mind that understands human nature knows the power of a reason to endure. You do not have to have a grand mission or force meaning onto every hardship. You only have to recognize that purpose gives us strength, that a why makes suffering bearable, and that finding or creating meaning in your struggles is one of the deepest sources of resilience. This explains so much. Why people with purpose survive what others cannot. Why meaningless suffering is the hardest to bear. Why a reason to endure can carry us through almost anything. It also offers strength, since connecting your struggles to a purpose you value makes them possible to bear. To understand that purpose carries us through pain is to recognize the extraordinary power of a reason to endure, and to know that even in your hardest moments, finding some meaning in the struggle can give you the strength to carry what would otherwise be unbearable. We are moved by beauty. We are moved by beauty, stirred by the sight of something beautiful in ways that reach past reason into something deep and wordless in us. Because the response to beauty is a profound and mysterious part of human nature. A sunset, a piece of music, a moment of grace can move us to tears or fill us with wonder, touching something that mere usefulness never reaches. This capacity to be moved by beauty is one of the quiet glories of being human. Psychologists studying awe and aesthetic experience find that beauty and wonder nourish the spirit and connect us to something larger than ourselves. Think of a moment beauty stopped you in your tracks, a landscape, a song, a face, and how it touched something deep and wordless, lifting you out of yourself. Beauty moved you past reason. A mind that understands human nature honors this capacity rather than dismissing it. You do not have to justify your response to beauty or treat it as frivolous, since it is one of life's deep nourishments. You only have to recognize that we are moved by beauty, that this response reaches something essential in us, and that making room for beauty and wonder feeds the human spirit. This explains so much: why art matters, why nature restores us, why beauty can move us to tears. It also offers a source of renewal, since seeking out beauty nourishes something words cannot reach. To understand that we are moved by beauty is to honor one of the quiet glories of human nature and to let yourself be stirred by the beautiful, knowing that this wordless response feeds a part of you that nothing practical ever could. Hope is what keeps us going. Hope is what keeps us going, the quiet force that carries us forward through darkness, because as long as we can hope, we can endure. And when hope is gone, so is our strength. Hope is not naive optimism, but the deep human capacity to believe that things can be better, that the darkness will pass, that our efforts might matter. It is among the most essential and sustaining forces in human nature. Psychologists find that hope is powerfully protective, that the ability to envision a better future sustains us through hardship and even extends our capacity to endure. Think of how hope has carried you through hard times, how the belief that things could improve gave you strength to continue, and how the loss of hope, by contrast, drains all energy to go on. Hope kept you moving. A mind that understands human nature honors and protects this force. You do not have to force false optimism or deny real difficulties. You only have to recognize the sustaining power of hope, that the capacity to believe in a better future is what carries us through darkness, and that nurturing hope in yourself and others is one of the most life-giving things you can do. This explains so much: why hope sustains us, why its loss is so dangerous, why even a little hope can keep a person going. It also offers strength, since protecting and nurturing hope is protecting your capacity to endure. To understand that hope is what keeps us going is to recognize the quiet force that carries every human heart through its darkest passages, and to guard that hope gently as one of the most essential and sustaining parts of being alive. The forces that move every heart. The forces that move every heart are what this tier has been revealing. The deep drivers beneath all the surface of human behavior, the same in every person who has ever lived. Every truth here has named a fundamental longing to matter, to connect, to be understood, to love, to grow, to hope. And together they form the deep current running beneath all of human life. This is the great insight of this tier, that beneath the endless variety of human behavior, the same deep forces move us all. When you understand these drivers, people become far less mysterious, because you see the universal longings beneath their particular actions. Wisdom has always held that to understand the deepest human needs is to understand people themselves. Think of how much clearer human behavior becomes when you see the deep drivers beneath it. The need to matter behind the striving, the hunger for love behind the searching, the longing to be understood behind the reaching. A mind that understands human nature sees these forces in everyone and meets people at the level of their deepest needs. You do not have to analyze everyone or reduce people to their drives. You only have to recognize that the same deep forces move every heart, that beneath all the difference lives a shared human longing, and that meeting people at the level of these needs is the deepest way to connect. Rest tonight in knowing that beneath the surface of every person, including yourself, move the same fundamental longings to matter, to love, to be understood, to hope, and that a mind which sees these deep drivers understands not just others, but the shared human heart that beats, in the end, in all of us alike. We are more alike than different. We are far more alike than we are different, and this may be the deepest truth of all about human nature. Beneath the endless surface variety of people, the different faces, cultures, opinions, and lives run the same fundamental hopes, fears, and longings. Everyone wants to be loved, fears rejection, longs to matter, dreads loss, and hopes for a little peace. The differences are real, but shallow. The sameness runs deep. Psychologists and anthropologists alike find that across all human variety lie the same core emotions and needs, universal to our species. Think of how, when you truly get to know someone very different from you, you almost always discover a person struggling with the same basic hopes and fears you know from the inside. The difference gave way to recognition. A mind that understands human nature holds this truth close, seeing past surface difference to shared humanity. You do not have to pretend everyone is identical or ignore real differences. which have their own value. You only have to recognize that beneath the variety, we share the same deep human heart, that the person who seems most different from you is, underneath, moved by the same longings. This explains so much: why we can connect across any divide, why understanding dissolves so much fear, why the stranger becomes familiar the moment we see beneath the surface. It also heals division, since seeing our shared humanity is the ground of all compassion. To understand that we are more alike than different is to see, beneath every surface difference, the same human heart that beats in you, and to meet even the most different person as a fellow traveler sharing the same deep hopes and fears. Everyone is doing their best they can. Everyone is doing the best they can with what they have, and holding this truth gently transforms how we see the difficult people in our lives. It does not mean everyone's best is good, or that harm should be excused. It means that people act from the resources they have, the wounds they carry, the fears that drive them, the limits of their understanding, and that within those constraints, they are usually doing the best they can manage. Almost no one is being difficult on purpose. Think of how, when you have fallen short, it was rarely from malice, but from your own limits, fears, and pain. And consider that the same is true of others. Their worst was often their limit, not their choice. A mind that understands human nature holds this compassionate view without becoming naive. You do not have to excuse harm or stay near those who wound you, since boundaries still matter. You only have to recognize that people are usually doing their best within their limits, that the difficult person is more often struggling than scheming. This explains so much: why people fail us without meaning to, why understanding someone's limits softens our anger, why compassion grows when we see the constraints others act within. It also brings peace, since assuming others' best, while still protecting yourself, releases a great deal of resentment. To understand that everyone is doing the best they can is to meet even difficult people with compassion for their limits, and to release the exhausting belief that those who hurt you did so freely, when they were usually just doing the best that their wounds and fears allowed. Understanding others frees you. Understanding others frees you more than it changes them, because seeing why people do what they do releases you from the anger and confusion their behavior once caused. When someone's actions baffle or wound us, we suffer, taking it personally, spinning in resentment. But when we understand the fear, the wound, the need beneath their behavior, something loosens in us, and we are freed, whether or not they ever change. Psychologists note that understanding the causes of behavior reduces our reactive anger and increases our peace. Think of how differently you felt about someone once you understood what drove them, how the understanding cooled your anger and released you from taking it personally, even though they stayed the same. Understanding freed you, not them. A mind that understands human nature seeks this freedom through insight. You do not have to understand everyone perfectly or let understanding become an excuse for mistreatment. You only have to recognize that understanding others frees you, that grasping the why behind behavior releases you from much of the hurt it caused. This explains so much: why understanding brings peace, why insight dissolves resentment, why seeing clearly sets us free, even when nothing external changes. It also offers relief, since the understanding you seek benefits you first. To understand that understanding others frees you is to seek insight, not to excuse people, but to release yourself, and to recognize that the deep comprehension of why people are as they are is, above all, a gift you give to your own peace. Compassion is the highest sight. Compassion is the highest form of seeing, the clearest and most complete way to understand another human being, because it holds both their light and their darkness in a single, gentle view. We often think of compassion as soft, but it is actually the most accurate way to see, taking in the whole of a person, their wounds and their struggles and their humanity, rather than the flat, partial picture that judgment gives. To see with compassion is to see truly. Wisdom traditions across the world have held that compassion is not blindness, but the deepest form of clear sight. Think of how judgment reduces a person to their worst act, while compassion sees the whole human being, the fear and pain and history behind the behavior, and how much truer that fuller picture is. Compassion saw more, not less. A mind that understands human nature comes to see that compassion and clear sight are the same thing. You do not have to excuse harm or abandon discernment, since compassion includes seeing clearly. You only have to recognize that compassion is the highest form of understanding, that to see someone with genuine compassion is to see them most truly and completely. This explains so much, why the wisest people are so often the kindest, why deep understanding produces gentleness, why judgment always sees less than compassion does. It also offers a way of being, since choosing compassion is choosing the clearest sight. To understand that compassion is the highest sight is to recognize that the most accurate way to see any human being is with a gentle and complete understanding, and to meet the world and everyone in it with the clear-eyed compassion that sees the whole person, not merely their surface. We are all afraid and brave at once. We are all afraid and brave at once, carrying fear and courage together in the same heart, and recognizing this holds both a deep compassion and a quiet respect for every person. No one is fearless, and no one is only afraid. Every person you meet is frightened of something, and every person is also, in their own way, being brave, facing their fears, carrying their burdens, continuing on despite it all. The fear and the courage live side by side. Psychologists understand courage not as the absence of fear, but as action in its presence, which means the brave and the afraid are the same people. Think of how you carry both fear and courage every day, frightened yet still showing up, and consider that everyone around you is doing exactly the same, brave and scared at once. The fear and the courage were both real. A mind that understands human nature honors both in every person. You do not have to hide your fear or pretend to be fearless, since courage includes fear. You only have to recognize that everyone is both afraid and brave, that the people around you are all carrying fear and finding courage at the same time, just as you are. This explains so much, why everyone deserves compassion for their fears and respect for their courage, why the human condition is one of quiet, daily bravery. It also offers connection, since seeing the fear and courage in everyone links you to them. To understand that we are all afraid and brave at once is to meet every person with both compassion for their fear and respect for their courage, and to recognize the quiet, daily bravery of every human heart, including your own. Kindness is the truest strength. Kindness is the truest strength, not weakness, because it takes far more strength to be kind, especially in a hard world, than to be cruel or cold. We sometimes mistake kindness for softness, but genuine kindness, chosen in a world that does not always reward it, requires real courage and inner strength. It is easy to be hard. It is strong to stay kind. Psychologists find that kindness and compassion are linked to genuine strength and resilience, not fragility. Think of how much easier it is to be cynical, guarded, or cold, and how much strength it takes to remain kind and open despite hurt and disappointment. Kindness was the harder, stronger choice. A mind that understands human nature recognizes kindness as strength. You do not have to be a pushover or mistake kindness for having no boundaries, since real kindness includes them. You only have to recognize that genuine kindness is a form of strength, that staying warm and open in a hard world takes more courage than growing cold, and that choosing kindness is choosing the harder, stronger path. This explains so much why kindness endures, why the truly strong are so often gentle, why cruelty is more often weakness than power. It also offers a way of being, since choosing kindness is choosing strength. To understand that kindness is the truest strength is to see that remaining warm and compassionate in a difficult world is not weakness, but courage, and to recognize that the kindness you choose, especially when it is hard, is one of the strongest and bravest things a human being can offer. Everyone is simply trying to be okay. Everyone is simply trying to be okay, to feel safe, to ease their pain, to find a little peace. And seeing this beneath all human behavior dissolves so much judgment. Underneath the endless variety of what people do, the good and the bad, the wise and the foolish, runs this simple, universal effort to feel okay, to reduce suffering, to find some comfort and safety in a hard world. Even harmful behavior is usually a clumsy attempt to feel okay. Think of how your own worst moments were usually attempts to ease some pain or fear, and consider that the same is true of everyone, that behind even difficult behavior is a person just trying to be okay. The effort to be okay was underneath it all. A mind that understands human nature sees this simple truth beneath the complexity. You do not have to excuse harmful attempts to feel okay or stay near those who hurt you in their struggle. You only have to recognize that everyone is simply trying to be okay, that beneath all behavior is a person seeking safety, comfort, and peace, however clumsily. This explains so much why people do what they do, why so much harm comes from misguided attempts to ease pain, why understanding this simple drive softens our judgment of almost everyone. It also brings peace, since seeing this shared effort connects you to all people. To understand that everyone is simply trying to be okay is to see, beneath all the confusing variety of human behavior, the same tender effort to find a little safety and peace, and to meet others and yourself with compassion for the simple, universal struggle just to be okay. To understand is to forgive more. To understand is to forgive more. Because the deeper we understand why people do what they do, the more our anger softens into compassion. This does not mean excusing harm or forgetting real wrongs. It means that understanding the fear, the wound, the history, and the limits behind someone's behavior tends, naturally, to soften our judgment of it. The more fully we see, the more we forgive. There is an old idea that to understand everything is to forgive everything. And while few of us reach that fully, the direction is true. Think of how your anger towards someone softened once you truly understood what they had been through, how understanding made forgiveness easier, almost natural. Understanding opened the door to forgiveness. A mind that understands human nature finds that insight and forgiveness travel together. You do not have to forgive everything, or let understanding erase all boundaries, since some things still require distance. You only have to recognize that understanding softens judgment, That the more deeply you grasp why people are as they are, the more compassion and forgiveness naturally follow. This explains so much: why understanding brings peace, why the wisest are often the most forgiving, why insight dissolves so much anger. It also offers freedom, since forgiveness, born of understanding, releases you as much as anyone. To understand that to understand is to forgive more, is to see that deep comprehension of human nature naturally softens the heart, and to let your growing understanding of people become a growing capacity for the compassion and forgiveness that free you from the weight of old resentments. We are all in this together. We are all in this together. Every human being sharing the same brief, uncertain, difficult, and beautiful passage through life. And remembering this is the ground of all compassion and connection. Whatever divides us, we share the deepest things: the same mortality, the same longing for love, the same fears and hopes, the same fragile journey from birth to death. Beneath every difference, we are companions in the same human condition. Think of how the awareness that everyone around you is facing the same uncertain journey, carrying the same fears, longing for the same love, can dissolve division and open the heart. We were traveling together all along. A mind that understands human nature holds this truth as a source of connection. You do not have to feel close to everyone or ignore real differences, which remain. You only have to recognize that we are all in this together, sharing the same brief and difficult passage, facing the same human condition beneath all that seems to separate us. This explains so much: why compassion feels so right, why our shared humanity can bridge any divide, why remembering our common journey softens the heart toward everyone. It also brings peace, since feeling our fundamental togetherness eases the loneliness of the human condition. To understand that we are all in this together is to feel the deep companionship beneath all human difference, and to move through the world with the warmth of one who knows that every person is a fellow traveler on the same short, uncertain, and precious journey, and that none of us walks it alone. The peace of understanding. The peace of understanding is what all of this has been quietly leading toward, the deep calm that comes from finally seeing human nature clearly, without illusion and without fear. When you understand people, yourself, and the forces that move us all, the world becomes far less bewildering and far less wounding. So much of our suffering came from not understanding, from taking things personally, from expecting people to be other than they are. Understanding dissolves so much of that pain. You have seen the surface and the depths now, the masks and the hidden selves, the darkness and the light, the deep drivers beneath every heart. And in that seeing is a great and quiet peace. You do not have to understand everything perfectly to feel it. You only have to rest in what you have come to see: that people are human, that you are human, that the same hopes and fears move us all. Let that understanding settle over you now, softening your judgments, easing your hurts, quieting the confusion that once made the human world so hard. There is nothing more to figure out tonight. You understand enough. Let the peace of that understanding hold you, gentle and complete, as the day releases you and the quiet begins to come. The gentle view of everyone. The gentle view of everyone is where all this understanding finally rests, in a soft and compassionate way of seeing every person you will ever meet, including yourself. You know now that behind every face is a whole hidden world, a private shame, a quiet fear, a deep longing to be loved and understood, a person simply trying to be okay. And knowing this, judgment gives way to gentleness. There is nothing left to figure out now, no one left to resent, no confusion left to untangle. There is only this soft, wide compassion for the whole struggling, hoping, frightened, beautiful human family of which you are one. Let your view of everyone grow gentle now. Let the people who once troubled you become simply human. Let yourself, too, be met with the same softness. You have understood enough for one night. Let the understanding turn to warmth, and the warmth to rest. There is nothing more to do now, but let the gentle view settle over you, and everyone and everything as you drift towards sleep. The quiet that holds you. The quiet that holds you is where this ends, and where you let everything go. There is nothing more to understand tonight, nothing more to figure out or hold. There is only the dark and the warmth and the soft weight of your own tiredness, and a stillness so complete it asks nothing of you at all. You understand enough. You are enough. You are held. Let the thoughts drift far away now, like something happening in another room. Let the breath slow on its own. Let the whole day and all its people dissolve into the quiet. There is nothing left to do but rest, nothing to solve, nothing to carry, nothing to fear. You have everything you need, here, within you. For now, let it all grow soft and dark and still. Let the quiet hold you. Let yourself, at last, sleep low and soften through them, and end on silence rather than any closing line or call to action.